world. We turn now to Ohio, where a grand jury has declined to indict a white police officer who shot and killed a 22-year-old African-American man named John Crawford. On August 5th, 4 days before the unarmed black teenager Michael Brown was fatally shot by police in a case that ignited the country, John Crawford walked into a Walmart in Beaver Creek, Ohio. According to his girlfriend, the two went to the store to buy supplies for making s'mores at a cookout. As he walked around the store talking on his cell phone, Crawford picked up an unloaded BB air rifle that was lying on a shelf.
Surveillance footage released Wednesday following the grand jury's decision shows what happened next. As Crawford stands in the pet supplies aisle talking on a cell phone, a customer calls 911. In this footage, the 911 call has been synced with the surveillance footage.
Beaver Creek 911, where's your emergency?
I'm at the Beaver Creek Walmart. There's a gentleman walking around with a gun in the store.
Is he got it pulled out?
Yeah, he's like pointing at people.
What does he look like?
He's a black male, probably about 6 foot tall.
Okay. What's he wearing?
Blue shirt, blue pants.
While the caller, Ronald Ritchie, claims Crawford is pointing the gun at people, the surveillance footage shows he's pointing the gun at the ground, occasionally swinging it and prodding supplies on a shelf in front of him. Ritchie later acknowledged to The Guardian, quote, "At no point did he shoulder the rifle and point it at somebody."
Minutes into the call, Ritchie tells a dispatcher Crawford is pointing the gun at two children. The surveillance footage shows that while a woman and two children appear at the end of the aisle, Crawford never actually points the gun at them.
He's a black male, black shirt and blue jeans.
Yeah.
Does he have a hat or anything on?
No, he's got like an afro.
An afro? Okay. Beaver Creek, did you get that? I got it. Has an afro.
Right here, please.
Gotcha. What's your name again, sir?
My name is Ronald Ritchie. He just pointed at like two children.
Just over a minute later, police appear in the footage. In the span of about a second, police can be heard shouting at Crawford and shooting him twice. Crawford is facing to the side with the BB gun swinging loosely toward the ground. As the officers advance, he appears to bend his knees.
Sir, what's going on?
Gunshots in the store. Which corner of the store? Police officers are here. They're on the scene.
Crawford collapses and police move to restrain him. He was taken to a hospital but died of his wounds. Lacey Johnson, the mother of Crawford's two young children, says she was on the phone with him and heard him tell police it's not real. She put the call on speakerphone, and John Crawford's father, who was with Johnson at the time, said he heard his son gasping for air. He told the Cincinnati Enquirer, "I'm virtually listening to my kid taking his last breath."
Another woman also lost her life that day at the Walmart. In the panic that ensued amidst the police advance, a customer named Angela Williams, the one shown earlier in the pet aisle shopping with her two young children, went into cardiac arrest and died. Well, on Wednesday, a special grand jury concluded police were justified in indicting John Crawford. At a news conference, the special prosecutor who handled the case, Mark Piepmeyer, acknowledged that without Ronald Ritchie's 911 call, the shooting never would have happened.
We've got a caller who, I think for the most part, saw what he said on the 911 call. Some of the things he said on the 911 call, maybe he was trying to fill in some gaps in what he saw, but he very clearly tells the 911 operator, "I'm in a Walmart. There's a guy in here with an assault rifle. He's loading it and he's pointing it at people." And this is what is communicated to the police officers. The one officer even calls back in and he's basically, "Wait a minute, are you saying he's actually pointing it at people?" And they say yes. And the law is real clear. When you're a police officer responding to the scene, it's not what is true or not true. It's what you reasonably believe to be true. And there's no reason for these officers not to believe that's what's going on.
The Justice Department says they'll review the shooting. To talk more about the case, we're joined by two guests. In New York, Rashad Robinson is with us, Executive Director of Color of Change, a national organization that's been calling for weeks for Walmart to release the surveillance tapes. And in Columbus, Ohio, James Hayes is founding member of the Ohio Students Association, which has been organizing protests over the shooting of John Crawford. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! John, let's go to you first. James, let's go to you first in Columbus. Talk about your reaction to the grand jury not finding the police officers guilty in the shooting.
Well, first, thank you all for having me on the show. When many of us were present in while they were making the announcement, and to be honest, none of us were shocked. For weeks, the family has been asking for the Department of Justice to open their own investigation because the writing was on the wall that the grand jury would return with no indictment. The last time that Beaver Creek, Ohio was in national news, they were fighting the Regional Transit Authority from putting a bus stop near their mall that would allow residents from Dayton to access the mall, people who work there, people who shop there. We already know how Greene County jurors vote. There's just this good old boys network and this many conflicts of interest that which we understood made it unlikely that an indictment would be found. So we weren't surprised, but we were very saddened. We were very saddened that the jury was unable to indict these officers, unable to push this case forward for a jury trial, saddened that the prosecutor didn't really attempt to prosecute this officer, but instead seemed to be justifying the decisions, trying to figure out how to show that there was no one at fault. But while being saddened, we understand that we must push forward, and it only strengthens our resolve to fight for justice for John, his family, and to fight for true systemic change that will make sure that there are fewer and fewer John Crawfords.
And James Hayes, why did it take so long for this video to come out after the grand jury decision? Clearly, everyone knew that there had to be surveillance cameras inside the Walmart that might have captured some of these events.
That's something we've been asking for since a week after John was killed. Release the tape. Our first round of actions, we had an action in Cleveland. We had a march in Beaver Creek where about 200 protesters went to the Beaver Creek police station. And that round of protests culminated in action at our Ohio Attorney General Mike DeWine's office. The day after that, Mike DeWine allowed the family and the lawyers to see about 6 minutes of the footage from the Walmart security cameras. Afterwards, the family said our son was murdered, and we were pushing for a public release, but we were told that it could take up to 2 to 3 years for that tape to be released when we initially went and spoke with representatives from Mike DeWine's office. It's clear that they knew if they released the tape before the jury made its decision, that the public was going to come to a decision before them, and everyone who's seen the tape, it's resonating across the country right now. People are seeing that John Crawford had absolutely no time to respond to the officers. They entered the store at 8:25, and by 8:27, John Crawford was on the ground with 2 bullets inside of his body, and I honestly think that they knew that they were going to not try to really indict this officer, and they didn't want the public to indict him before the grand jury had an opportunity to make their decision.
The Crawford family's attorney, Michael Wright, reacted to the grand jury's decision in a statement that said, quote, rather than advocate for the constitutional rights of John Crawford, III, and Angela Williams, the other victim in the case, Attorney General DeWine and Special Prosecutor Mark Piepmeyer made excuses for the officers' actions and have erroneously argued the officers' actions were reasonable. The statement continued, quote, the Crawford family feels they've been victimized all over again and once again requests the U.S. Department of Justice conduct an independent investigation into the tragic death of John H. Crawford III. This is John Crawford's girlfriend, Lacey Johnson, who was on the phone with Crawford. This is the mother of his 2 children when police shot him.
I just heard them just shoot him like he wasn't nothing. He was just telling them that it wasn't real, and they didn't even give him a chance to respond. They just shot.
It's not real. Johnson says those were Crawford's last words. Crawford's father says he heard his son's last moments on speakerphone. He later watched the surveillance video showing his death and described what he saw.
It was just unbelievable. That's all I could tell you. I pray that no one ever has to go through what we're going through. It's unconscionable. You know, I saw my son getting murdered.
We're going to turn now to Special Prosecutor Mark Piepmeyer describing how the police officer who shot Crawford responded to the 911 call.
I mean, again, you could see how serious this was because he gets out of his car, puts his regular service piece in the trunk, gets out an assault rifle. The other officer shows up, does the same thing, puts on his tactical vest, gets his assault rifle. So it's very obvious from what they did. They thought this was the real deal. And then they're beating feet in there. They're not just walking around. You can see as they're coming in. I mean, it looks like a combat picture. And that's what these guys were taught. That's how they're taught to approach this kind of thing.
Special Prosecutor Mark Piepmeyer acknowledged the police response might have been a little bit over the top. James Hayes, who is Special Prosecutor Piepmeyer?
Well, in Ohio, we know Mark Piepmeyer as the prosecutor who failed to bring justice in the Timothy Thomas trial, which before the events in Ferguson was the last time there was an uprising in an American city around race relations. We know him as the prosecutor who sent the inmates in the Lucasville prison uprising to death row. When he was appointed, it was clear that that this was not a good sign for what would happen in Greene County, and it was more fuel to the fire in terms of trying to bring the Department of Justice in to open their own investigation.
And what about the context of this happening in Greene County? For listeners and viewers around the country, tell us a little bit about Greene County.
Well, as I said earlier, you know, the last time that Beaver Creek, Ohio was in national news, they were trying to keep black people out of their city, trying to keep black people from shopping in their mall, trying to keep the black people who work in their mall from having an easy access through public transit. You know, Greene County is a place where, in the 30s and 40s, and even before that, many Southerners were moving up for job opportunities, working at the Air Force base in the area, and those mentalities and attitudes are still prevalent. You know, our Attorney General, Mike DeWine, is from Greene County. He grew up there and began his political career there as a prosecutor. His daughter is currently a prosecutor there. You know, there's a good old boys network that has power in the county still to this day. And you know, it's clear that the nepotism and the conflicts of interest in this case are especially ripe. Officer Williams, the shooter, the man who killed John Crawford, his father was also on the Beaver Creek police force. You know, and so it's no surprise that he's receiving special treatment. I mean, this is the second time that Officer Williams has killed somebody in Greene County in the last 4 years. So it's pretty clear that he should not be a police officer. I mean, if a Walmart employee misses 2 shifts, they're going to be fired. So, you know, even if this was the most genuine, honest mistake, it's pretty clear that this officer should be let go and try to find something else that he can do better. But Greene County is a place where we were always worried that we would be unable to find justice. It's a place, and it's one of the reasons that led to us wanting to make the pilgrimage, make the journey from the Walmart where John Crawford was killed to the courthouse in Xenia, walking through those back roads and through Greene County, so we could, in our action, not only bring attention from around the country to Greene County, but give an opportunity for us to show the residents of Greene County, those who are with us and those who are against us, that people are willing to take action in this case. James
Hayes is speaking to us from Columbus, Ohio. Rashad Robinson here in New York, Executive Director of Color of Change, usually in the Bay Area. Walmart is the largest retailer of rifles in the country.
Absolutely. They have spent years lobbying for looser gun laws in this country, partnering with the American Legislative Exchange Council. They actually wrote the Stand Your Ground law, which became famous during the Trayvon Martin tragedy, and pushed that law along with the NRA to about 26 states around the country. They are the largest seller of rifles and guns in this country, and they're also the largest employer of black people and women in this country. And so to the extent that, part of our campaign was really focusing on what is Walmart's social responsibility in this? How are they going to sort of hide behind, what's happening and not release those tapes? There were over 200 cameras in that store, and we had to wait weeks and weeks for any sense of understanding of what happened. So for customers, for black folks who are shopping in Walmart and working in Walmart, what can they expect from this giant about their safety?
And obviously, the fact that those tapes were not released until now, when this occurred even before the shooting in Ferguson, shows that this would have created an even bigger national furor if those tapes had come out at that time.
Absolutely. I mean, here's what's happening. All around the country, at Color of Change, we continue to hear the stories from our members. We continue to see these issues bubble up over and over and over again, where black people are harmed or put or killed by police officers, and there's no sense of justice, no sense of accountability. The fact of the matter is that for black parents, for people who are family members or care about black people, the idea that we can expect any sense of justice or any sense of safety from our law enforcement figures, that we can call 911 and expect the law enforcement figures to show up and protect us and see our lives as valuable and with humanity. Ohio has open carry laws. Part of that has been pushed by the NRA. Which open carry laws means that you can carry a gun around openly in the state of Ohio. You could carry a gun into Walmart. So in fact, even if he did have the gun in the store, he was not breaking the law. These laws do not protect black people because police officers are not trained to see black people as human. And this is an ongoing problem, and all of us have to be deeply concerned.
You were in Ferguson. The key point in both these cases, Pete Meyer laid it out. It's not the truth that matters. It's what the police officers believed, and they saw that area as a combat zone. Michael Brown, too, on the street, how the police officer saw him.
It's absolutely about sort of this racism and implicit bias that exists in our society. And also the fact of the matter is that police are allowed to investigate themselves, that we have this political system where prosecutors have no incentive, where the victims are black and the police officers are white, to prosecute vigorously. We saw this press conference, and we saw the press conferences coming out of Ferguson. Right from the start in both of those situations, we saw that the decks were stacked against justice, that there was sort of not going to be a sense of fairness, that there was not going to be a sense of fair play for the victims in these cases. And the fact of the matter is that the video not being released, the political apparatus in Ohio had weeks to criminalize John Crawford in death. The same way that Michael Brown was criminalized in death, that we're releasing all sorts of information. We're trying to create a sense of doubt in the community's mind. And so when these cases go to the grand jury, when they go to the community, that folks have sort of this understanding that these are not people that deserve our sympathy, that deserve to be seen as victims.
James Hayes, I wanted to ask you one other point. As I understand it, initial press reports indicated there were multiple 911 calls to the police, and it turned out that there was really only one 911 call to the police, the one that we featured earlier on. Is that accurate?
It's absolutely accurate. There were multiple 911 calls, but the only one before officers entered the store and fired shots was by Ronald Ritchie.
Well, on that note, I want to thank you both for being with us here in New York. Rashad Robinson is the executive director of Color of Change. James Hayes with us in Columbus, founding member of the Ohio Students Association, which has been organizing protests around the shooting of John Crawford, holding a BB gun in a Walmart store that he had picked up.
So some of you might remember the story of John Crawford III. He was in a Walmart shopping. He'd found a toy rifle BB gun that was out of its package at the Walmart. And you can see on the video he's goofing around, twirling it around a little bit. Every witness there has said that that he was just playing around with it, He didn't point it at anyone. He wasn't menacing anyone with it. But one of the people who saw him panicked, called the cops and said, there's a guy with a rifle here. Now, for the first time, we're going to see the video of what happened when the cops arrived, okay? Now, what might make your blood boil, and it did for me, is knowing that these cops were just let off by a grand jury. They're not indicted. They will not be charged. Look at how quickly they shoot, and looking to see if you can see what Crawford is doing with the toy rifle when they arrive, okay, when he sees them arrive. Let's watch. So you see him there at the end of the aisle. At this point, he has no idea that anybody's coming. He's swinging it around a little bit. Now he sees somebody. He puts it down. He's already shot. How quickly did they shoot? He passed away. He's dead. I want to show you the video in slow motion as well, and a little more, not slow motion, but a little closer up so you get a sense of it, okay? So here he is swinging his arm. You'll see that he hears and sees something, and he, of course, naturally wants to run. He puts the gun down, the toy gun. The gun's on the ground. There's no disputing that the gun's on the ground. Again, it's not a gun. It's not a real gun. It's a toy gun, okay? So, look, here's my main beef with this. So, look, the parents are saying, of course, that he shouldn't have been shot. I don't know what kind of person looks at that video and thought he should be shot. Now, authorities say, obviously, he had committed no crime, that it was a mistake, he shouldn't have been shot, but that the cops had made an honest mistake, right? But as you look at that, how do you not come away thinking, at the very least, that they shot too quickly? Now, the parents say not only was he doing nothing wrong, not only was this a wrong shooting, but that the federal authorities should look into whether there was something racial here, because the kid's black. And now look, you've seen white people, white men, white women, and sometimes some people of color, but mainly white people, all across the country, especially in Texas, do an open carry where they carry actual assault rifles, real rifles. Nobody calls it in. The cops don't come and immediately shoot them on the spot. They have a right to carry it. He has a right. He'd have a right to carry a real gun. He certainly had a right to carry a toy gun. But what did they give him? Did they give him a half a second, 1 second, 1.5 seconds before they shot him? So I don't know if it was racial. I don't know if they saw a black guy and they assumed, well, he must be dangerous. If they had seen a white guy, maybe they thought, well, maybe he's got a legal permit for that. Maybe they saw him twitch. But what would you do if the cops came in blazing? If you heard shouting and screaming, what would you do? Maybe you would put the toy gun down, which is what he did. Look, I remember when I was growing up as a kid, man, we'd get a warning. You remember the shows, the cop shows on TV? Freeze. You're under arrest. Does anybody say freeze anymore? Do the cops even say anything before they shoot and kill you first? Was there any chance that that cop, in that split second, thought, hey, maybe I should check to see if that gun is loaded, real, or in any way a danger to me or anyone else in the store? You saw the video. He didn't have time to assess any of that. Shoot first, ask questions later. Again, it's nearly impossible to determine what was in the cop's head in terms of racial intent, and I doubt there was malice, but I don't know. Of course, I don't know those guys, right? And might there have been subconscious assumptions made? It's a black guy, I gotta protect myself, as opposed to if it's a white guy, maybe he's a legal, open carry permit holder, right? I don't know about that. But what I do know is, unfortunately, we now live in a police state where the cops are trained, and that's part of the reason they're let off here. Because it's not like we got rogue cops here in this case that just did this shooting. It's the first time it's happened in America. Now we're doing the story over and over again. Why? Because they're trained to shoot immediately. Don't worry about freeze. Don't worry about seeing if there are any hostile intentions, whether somebody's going to get hurt. Make sure you don't endanger yourself. But you're cops. Look, part of your job is that you're in danger. And we appreciate that. And we respect that when you do it right. And we give you a gun, which gives you enormous responsibility, or it's supposed to. But these days, there is no responsibility. Don't take any danger. If you see anyone, just shoot them right away. Well, now an innocent kid is dead, and apparently there will be no consequences and no justice whatsoever.
Earlier this year, a 22-year-old man by the name of John Crawford was shot and killed by police officers in Cleveland after he was in a Walmart carrying a BB gun, okay? It wasn't a real gun, but as he was talking to his girlfriend on the phone, he had the BB gun by his side. He was swinging it around. Someone called the cops on him. Cops showed up, they shot him, and they killed him. Now, this, of course, was one of the many stories that led to many protests. People were outraged at the footage that was released. But now we have more footage that will probably outrage even more individuals. His girlfriend was interrogated by police officers, by a detective, actually, by the name of Rodney Curd, after this incident occurred. And Rodney Curd accused her of taking drugs, said that her eyes looked funny. There was no reason to believe that. She did nothing wrong. He was accusing her of knowing that he was armed and that he had a weapon. She denied that. In fact, we have one snippet of the interrogation for you guys. Take a look at that.
Where did he get this gun?
Sir, I don't know. I swear to God. Sir, I swear to God. I don't know. On everything I love, you can give me a lie detector test and everything.
What I'm having issues with is that you tell me that you didn't know he had a firearm with him. I'm having real issues with that. Because I'm telling you, anybody around me that carries a gun, I know about it. If I'm carrying a gun, other people know about it. If I got it underneath my shirt, they know I carry. That's something well known about people.
But he didn't have a gun. It was a BB gun. Wasn't a real gun, which you didn't really give him an opportunity to put down because you killed him very, very quickly, as is apparently very common practice in Ohio. They already know that because it's not like they didn't have information on what he was holding. Mm-hmm. Before he does that interrogation, he already has the facts, but he's going to cover his own ass, full well knowing that they killed her partner.
Yep.
And he doesn't care. He's like, let me do more damage to this family by trying to get her to admit something that isn't true. But by the way, what difference would it have made? We already know it wasn't a real gun. So even if she admitted it, why? Because they want to introduce doubt.
Yeah, of course.
That's the whole point. Oh, at some point somebody smoked pot. They had detention in school. The girlfriend said there was a gun, right? That's exactly what they want to say. That's why they don't mind traumatizing her and yelling at her like that after he's already dead, for Christ's sake.
The detective kept asking her whether or not she had a criminal record. She wasn't there. She did nothing wrong. There was no reason to ask her if she had a criminal record. There was no reason to ask her about her drug use. There was no reason to interrogate her the way that they did. But you're right. It was to place the blame on him, even though they had shot and killed an unarmed man. Again, in a state that has open carry laws. So you can carry weapons openly if you have a certain skin color. That's okay. No one's going to call the cops on your ass. But if you're a black guy walking around in Walmart with a BB gun, well, of course, we're going to call the cops on you. Cops are going to show up and justifiably shoot you.
But we're supposed to respect the cops in Ohio. That's what they're now demanding after Andrew Hawkins, the football player, wore a shirt they didn't like. They say, how dare you disrespect us? Mm-hmm. Didn't that cop in that video look so worthy of respect there that after you've killed someone's loved one, that you bring them in a room and accuse them of being a criminal and try to get them to give false evidence, and you know would be false evidence, against the person you just shot and killed?
Yep.
I don't know why people don't respect the Ohio cops. It's really hard to figure out. So, do these people represent you? I mean, and then people are outraged when African Americans protest. What would you do? What would you do if the situation was reversed and they view you as the enemy? And then if they kill you, the only thing they care about is protecting themselves, not protecting you and your family. They're not sorry what they did to you. They're not sorry what they compound the problems. Then they go and browbeat and intimidate and harass your family. Gee, I wonder why people protest. You'd be crazy not to protest. This is a really important moment in history, I think. I think we might be on to a new civil rights era and movement. That's what I feel. And I'm hopeful about that, right? Because I see a lot of people getting frustrated, and even some people opening their eyes and seeing this for the first time.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that, yes, there's still a lot of pushback from people saying, no, the cops are right. All you have to do is listen to them. You know, you got a million of those guys, right? But I think there's a lot of good people in the country who are saying, well, 12-year-olds, and they shot him in 2 seconds.
Yeah.
You know, and boy, if they had gone on to Cliven Bundy's ranch and shot his 12-year-old grandson in 2 seconds, what would conservatives have called them? Jackbooted thugs, right? Mm-hmm. So, but that process is beginning. So it's a great thing that we're seeing it. It's super frustrating to see how it unfolds right before our eyes. But it's better that we see it so we can disinfect it.
Yep.
And I hope that there is a new movement that comes out of it. So yesterday, a grand jury refused to indict the police officers involved in shooting and killing Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old with a toy gun. Now, that's because Tim McGinty, the prosecutor, threw the case and bragged about throwing the case. He told the grand jury, which is unprecedented, that they should not indict. The whole point of a prosecutor going in front of a grand jury is to get an indictment. He presented witnesses not on behalf of the victim, but on behalf of the defendants. Unheard of. I'd literally never heard of it until a crop of corrupt prosecutors in this country decided that no matter what cops do and no matter who they murder, they were going to protect them at all costs because they figured that would help their political careers. So we've seen it all across the country now, and McGinty's the latest one to do it. But there is an extra twist to this story. Ohio is an open carry state. What does that mean? Well, let's go to Charles Pierce in Esquire. He explains, Ohio is an open carry state, so even if the cops assumed Rice was 18 and they also assumed his gun was real, they had no cause even to stop him, let alone open fire. Now, look, we've had pictures on the show. We'll have them for you in a second, too. White people, sometimes Latinos, carrying guns, assault rifles in Walmarts, wherever the hell they want. Nobody ever gets shot. Now, you got a 12-year-old with a toy gun here, but, ooh, he made the mistake of being black. So I'm going to show you the video one last time here. Look, he's shot in 2 seconds flat. And remember, it's an open carry state. If it was a real gun, he'd have every right to have that gun. Nonetheless, this is what they did to him. He's in a park where kids usually are. It's in Cleveland. They got a report. The 911 person knew that it could have been a toy gun. He didn't pass that along. She didn't pass that along, to be fair. Cops get there. Instead of pulling up on the street, they decided to pull right up to him. They didn't ask him any questions. They didn't say, is that a gun? Is that a toy gun? Hey, what's going on? Hey, drop it. As one writer said, they did not give him an opportunity to live. 2 seconds flat. But I see white people with assault rifles everywhere. I see them in front of mosques. I see them trying to intimidate Black Lives Matter protesters. In fact, some of them shot Black Lives Matter protesters. I see white people who then use that gun, not only against the Black Lives Matter, but they go into Planned Parenthoods and kill people, including cops. But no, you got rights. They got Second Amendment rights. Second Amendment rights. But you got a 12-year-old with a toy gun. He doesn't have any rights. He has the right to get murdered in 2 seconds flat, and then the cops get away with it. Okay, now, more details on Ohio's laws. Ohio, for instance, allows open carry without a permit virtually anywhere, with a major exception for keeping a gun in a car, which requires a concealed carry permit. Now, Tamir Rice, obviously not in a car. He can carry his toy gun anywhere, let alone a real gun. Well, he's not alone. John Crawford was also shot dead with a toy gun, also in Ohio. He was in a Walmart. Cops get a call. Now, yesterday on the program, I said they shot him and killed him in 6 seconds. That's true. You're about to see the video. It took 6 seconds for them to kill him. It took them 1 second to shoot him initially. Okay, they shot at him within 1 second. Now, remember, if this is a real gun, in Ohio, he has every right to carry it. And there's no one near him. It's not like there's other shoppers and he's pointing the gun at them or anything. And of course, it's not a real gun. It's a BB gun. All right, now watch the video. So there's Crawford. He picked up one that wasn't packaged. He's been lying around in that store for 2 years. He puts the gun down. They're shooting at him. He puts the gun down. Okay, the non-gun, by the way, the toy gun. He comes back, hey, not necessarily to pick up the gun. Maybe the cop thought he was going to pick up the gun. But he didn't pick up the gun. He had his hands up. And it doesn't matter. Shot dead. Shot dead. You have every right to carry a gun openly in Ohio unless you're black, in which case the cops will shoot at you within 1 to 2 seconds and murder you within at least 6 seconds. What happened? I thought everybody had a Second Amendment right. What happened? I thought we all had the rights. Oh, you meant just white people. And if you know the history of the Second Amendment, you would know that this is actually the point of the Second Amendment, at least in regards to the South. In the South, their militias were called, they had another name, slave patrols. The slave patrols were so that white people could be armed so they could shoot black people. You think black people had a right? Well, according to the Second Amendment, it says people, ignore the part about the militia, right? But people have a right to bear arms. Did the African-American people have rights to bear arms? No. They were slaves. They were the ones getting shot. You see how much things have changed. So, more explanation from Vox. They say misuse of a firearm is definitely grounds for formal police intervention, but not mere possession. When white people walk around with guns, that's not misusing it. When black people have toy guns that they're pointing down and there's no one anywhere near them, misuse of a toy gun, murder them. Okay. Then there's this question. They say the legal question for the officers involved in these shootings isn't whether Crawford and Rice had a right to carry a gun in public, but whether they reasonably believe the reported threats were still present up to the moment they shot Crawford and Rice. Well, isn't that neat? See, to me, that's even worse. So they're saying, yeah, you got a right to carry a weapon, but if the police perceive you as a threat, they have a right to kill you. Lo and behold, they don't perceive white people as a threat. They perceive black people as a threat, even if they have toy guns, even if they're 12 years old. The prosecutor, not the cops charged, the prosecutor, and then Tamir Rice said, well, I mean, he looked so much older, and and he was a big kid, so of course so we thought he was a threat. Come on, he said it was reasonable to think that 12-year-old was a threat because he looked so much larger. By the way, when they did a study on college campuses, they asked young white women to estimate the age of young black males over the age of 10. On average, they guessed 4.5 years older than the kids actually were. And they rated them as more threatening than white kids. They were just pictures. Nobody was threatening. Nobody was anything. Based on race. Oh, I don't know. They look old. They look threatening. They're black. Oh, I can reasonably perceive that they should be murdered. God damn it, it shouldn't be like this. Okay, here's another example. By putting police officers through a video game simulation, Josh Carell of the University of Colorado Boulder found cops generally pulled the trigger more quickly against black suspects than white suspects when the suspect was seen carrying a weapon. Now, I know people don't want to admit it. They're like, no way. There's no racism in America. No way. But we do the studies. It shows it. Cops see a black person, they shoot quicker. And you just saw the videos. Now, if you look here, I'll just give you a couple of white pictures here. These are guys in the country. Most of the states in this country have open carry, okay? Look at that giant weapon. That's in Walmart. John Crawford got shot at a Walmart with a toy gun. They have real weapons, assault rifles that they carry around. They're packing. They got lolly. They say, oh, it's their clothing and the way they looked. It's not just their race. That guy's got tattoos all over him. I mean, it's not like he's in a business suit. Nothing wrong with tattoos, but you hold it against black people. But when it's white people, I mean, he's got tattoos and he's dressed in the same way as black people and he's got an actual weapon. But what? But he's white. Why don't you just say it? So if you defend the rights of these wonderful people to have their real guns everywhere, yet you think cops should shoot at black people and black kids within 1 to 2 seconds if they think they might have a gun and they don't even bother asking them, well, then you might be a racist. So just get used to it, okay? That's what you are. Because I know, oh, you're so deeply offended. But when it comes to white people, they get to have guns, they get to have guns. Okay, black people, shoot him dead, that cop was right, that cop was reasonable, that cop was right. Wait, why are you defending a cop? I thought you loved the Second Amendment, right-wingers. I thought you were all about the Second Amendment. If Tamir Rice had a gun and was twirling it around and carrying it around with him, oh, yeah, well, he shouldn't because he's 12. But they said they thought he looked 18. They thought he looked like an adult. Shouldn't they have said, oh, you are a good, law-abiding American citizen having your Second Amendment rights in this public square? There's nobody around you that is not threatening anybody. In the Walmart, nobody around him. But if you're black, you're dead. If you're white, then you have your Second Amendment rights. If you think that, whether you recognize it or not, you're a goddamn racist. Jeffrey Fulmer is the police officer who's going to step up here and tell us what a terrible person Andrew Hawkins is, the Browns player who obviously made the statement about Tamir Rice and John Crawford on his shirt, and he's going to tell us who should apologize to who.
Well, first off, he doesn't have the clear view of the police conduct. He's calling for justice on 2 officers that were called to do their job with a male that had a gun inside a park, that they had to defend themselves and use deadly force on him. So it's not a call for justice. They were justified. And Cleveland police officers work with the Cleveland Browns hand in hand, and when he disrespects 2 of our officers, he's disrespecting everybody else.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did we disrespect you? You shot the kid dead in 2 seconds. Justified. Hey, listen, man, have just a shred of humanity and say, hey, man, we feel sick about what happened there. You know, they made a decision in that moment. You want to defend that decision? Say, look, I defended because we have a hard job and yada, all the bullshit you normally say. But don't go and tell us that they had no other choice. They were absolutely justified in shooting within 2 seconds. Nobody, come on, man. But the sick thing is some people do believe that because they want to believe it. No. Black people are dangerous, man. You got to shoot the 12-year-olds before you give them a chance to put anything down. Justified. And he's disrespecting all of us. How about Tamir Rice's family? How about Tamir Rice? Did you disrespect him when you shot him dead? God damn it. Get more from this jackass. Yes, I disrespect you, idiot. Go ahead.
But, okay, you guys disagree on that. Why should he apologize to you? Why shouldn't you apologize to him? You have a disagreement.
We're not apologizing to anybody. I mean, calling for justice on 2 of our officers, they need to do it to us because they're disrespecting our officers on a job we do hard every day and a job that 2 officers were put in a position to do by a male's actions. You know, he disrespected police officers who were out there doing their job. He's surrounded by police officers. When you talk about 2 of us that were put in a situation like these 2 where you're talking about all of us.
You know, isn't it funny because they always say like, oh, these black thugs, these right-wing idiots and stuff, right? These black thugs, they're always talking about respect, how we didn't respect them enough, and they feel dissed or disrespected. You can just see O'Reilly saying it, right? How about this thug? How about this guy who's going, I tell you, I was disrespected, man. We shot that kid dead right away. We didn't even fucking look. But how dare you fucking disrespect us, right? Hey, you know we surround you. You sound like a mafia asshole, okay? Is that disrespectful enough for you? Hey, next time before you shoot a kid dead, why don't you ask him to put the thing down, whatever it is, his toy down? Why don't you look first? Why don't you ask questions first? Why don't you say freeze first? Yes, I don't respect that. I don't respect you killing our children. More.
In the statement, you talk about providing, serving and providing security for the stadium. How is that relevant?
Well, a lot of police officers work there. We are with the Browns organization. When you talk about 2 of our officers, doing a justified shooting, you're talking about all of us. Any one of us could have been in that circumstance.
Sure, but I mean, are you implying that it's relevant somehow? Are you implying that security would change because of this disagreement?
No, we wouldn't change. We're here for the community. We're here for the people that go to the Browns games. We're here for the public.
Unless, of course, we're shooting him dead. Say, hey, listen, why did you make the threat then? He's surrounded by us, and in the original statement we said, hey, we provide security for the stadium. So what does that mean? Why did you bring that up? Why did you bring it up? It's either a threat or you're saying, hey, you know what, maybe we'll pull that security because we feel disrespected. So you're on your own. Well, what are you saying, right? No, because you want to go out there, you want to kill kids, and then you want to threaten people. Oh, I'm sorry, did I say too much? You want to kill kids? That's too much, right? I hope that you don't want to actively kill them. That's not why you're going out to do it. But when you show me disregard for human life like this, we're here to protect the community. That's why we don't ask any questions. We put a bullet in them right away. And it's not an isolated incident in Ohio. John Crawford also didn't have a real gun. They also shot him dead in 15 seconds in a Walmart. And then they browbeat his girlfriend afterwards, trying to get her to admit that he was dangerous. You already saw that it wasn't a real gun. And those two incidents are not alone. They fire hundreds of bullets at these two other unarmed passengers. Same Ohio cops, right? Oh, gee, you disrespect one of us. You disrespect all of us, right? Yeah, I'm disrespecting you. You put 20 bullets apiece in those two passengers. They were also unarmed. And then they had the nerve to sue afterwards, saying, how dare you suspend us for 3 days? For 3 days! More from this meathead.
You know, there's a video of this, and everything speaks for itself. Their action, the male's action, spoke for itself. I mean, the video clearly showed, and by the officer's statement, that they were justified in the deadly force.
You're saying the video clearly shows that the 12-year-old boy was an imminent lethal threat to the officers?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know if you didn't see it, but yeah, absolutely. This shooting was justified, and you know, like I said, it's a tragic that it was 12-year-old, but it was justified. Well, it depends what you're saying, what's unarmed. I mean, this male was obviously not, he wasn't unarmed. He had what they thought to be a gun, and they also thought him to be 20 years old. If he's 20 years old, we're not sitting here today. How about this? Listen to police officers' commands, listen to what we tell you, and just stop. I think that eliminates a lot of problems. I have kids too. They know how to respect the law. They know what to do when a police officer comes up to them. I think the nation needs to realize that when we tell you to do something, do it. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, then the courts will figure it out.
Listen to what the officer said. You killed him in 2 seconds. He didn't have time to listen to what you said. This Orwellian prick, we just saw the video. We've seen the video a million times. You pull up and you shoot him. You pull up and you shoot him. 1,000, 1,000, and he's dead. Just, for Christ's sake, be a human for a second and say, we're so sorry that 12-year-old kid died, man. Obviously, we didn't mean that. Is that too hard to say? Is it too hard to say, we didn't mean to kill your 12-year-old son? We're so sorry about that. The fact that it turned out to be a toy gun and he was 12, we feel sick about that. We wish it hadn't happened. Is that too hard to say? Tamir Rice was shot dead in 2 seconds in Ohio. Cops pulled up. They didn't ask him any questions. They assumed his toy gun was a real gun, and without any notice at all, shot him dead. How much notice can you give in 2 seconds? Now, I'm going to show you the video in a second, but first, I have news on it. That's why we're bringing this up. A grand jury in Ohio has decided not to press any charges against the two officers involved, Frank Garmbach or Timothy Lohman, who fatally shot Rice in the video you're about to see. So there's Tamir Rice. He's a 12-year-old at a park. The cops pull straight up to him. They're not on the street. They're not inquiring. They get out of the car, shoot him dead. 2 seconds. Now they claim, well, I couldn't tell, so better safe than sorry. Just murder the 12-year-old and figure things out later. Ask questions later. Black. Now, they don't say that. No, there was a real danger. Oh my God, I didn't know. It looked like something that was a gun. And the 911 operator heard that it was a toy gun, but didn't relay that to me. So I assumed I should shoot that black person dead just in case he might ever harm me. Now, wait a minute. If I was worried about being harmed, why didn't I pull up on the street, maybe take out my gun because I thought it was a real gun, and say, hey, hands up, freeze, you're under arrest. Throw the gun down. Are you a kid? What is that? What are you holding? Maybe I wait for backup. No, I drive right up to him and shoot him dead. I got him, right? And what happened? Free to go. Why? In this case, the prosecutor so clearly threw the grand jury investigation, they almost brag about it. Now, again, I was a prosecutor very briefly for 2 summers as an intern when I was in law school. But one thing I knew as a prosecutor, even working there briefly, was that the old saying, you can indict a ham sandwich if you want. Meaning you can indict anything. Defense cannot show up to grand jury investigations. The prosecutor has complete discretion. But these prosecutors all across the country, and definitely in this specific case, don't want to indict the cops. They're buddies with the cops. They work with the cops all the time. They love the cops. They want the cops to go scot-free. They're going to work with them tomorrow. Of course they're on the cop side. So they do the exact opposite. Just like in Ferguson, they present witnesses on behalf of the cops, not against the cops, in a grand jury proceeding. That's, except for the case of cops, unheard of. Unheard of. If a citizen had shot a cop, you think a prosecutor is going to go to grand jury and be like, now I can present any evidence I like, but I'm going to show you why you shouldn't convict this cop killer. You think they might do that at a grand jury? They're not going to do that at a grand jury hearing. If it's a cop who got shot, or anybody else who got shot, if a cop does a shooting of a black person, hey, let's go. Wipe it under the rug. Who cares? Now let me give you details. The Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office released investigations. This is before they go to the grand jury. Released investigations concluding the shooting was justified. The prosecutor's office, before going to prosecute, says shooting's definitely justified. Oh, thank you for not being biased. That's really appreciated. Those are not the defense. That's the prosecution. Okay, McKindy, who is the prosecutor here in Ohio, in Cuyahoga County, explained that he recommended no charges, too, after reviewing the case, calling it a perfect storm of human error that showed no criminal conduct by the police. Where the hell's the justice, man? Well, then why are you pretending to be the prosecutor? If you say, I'm positive the cops aren't guilty, and I'm going to try to prove that to a grand jury instead of doing my job, well, then recuse yourself. Give it over to some other independent authority. You can't just say, I declare the cops to be innocent, and then I will pretend to try them to see if a grand jury will indict them. You see, we're all in on it. It's so funny when we kill 12-year-olds and then brag about how we're going to get away with it. McKindy also said it would have been, quote, unreasonable to make an officer wait to see if a gun that someone was drawing from their pocket was real or a toy. So he thinks the actions of the cops are perfectly reasonable. In fact, if you'd asked him to do anything else, it would have been unreasonable. So now you know, black citizens of Ohio, but honestly, all citizens of Ohio, all 12-year-olds of Ohio, all parents in Ohio, you should know. Cops find it perfectly reasonable to pull up to your 12-year-old and shoot him dead in 2 seconds flat. They don't think it's reasonable to ask questions. They don't think it's reasonable to park, I don't know, 100 feet away, 20 feet away, 10 feet away. No, that's not reasonable. That would be unreasonable to ask them to do that. You're on notice now. They can shoot your kids dead, and there's not a goddamn thing you're going to do about it, because the prosecutor's going to come in and go, here, I am throwing the case. I will not do my job. I will do the opposite and make sure there is no justice. And you're on notice in Ohio. Any of your kids can get killed in 2 seconds flat, no questions asked, and the authorities will find it eminently reasonable. You saw that video? You thought that was reasonable? All these guys, the cops, the prosecutors, all in that area. Go, oh, no, yeah. Anybody who disagrees, the cops threatened athletes in Cleveland who disagreed that perhaps they wouldn't get protection. Well, if this is the kind of protection you're talking about, I don't want it. I don't want any part of it. Now, you can understand why the family is upset. More evidence that they presented that the prosecutors threw the case is they came out and put witnesses on the stand that exonerated what the cops did. Again, that is the exact opposite of the purpose of a grand jury proceeding. Do you want to try? You know, grand jury, you don't convict a person. It's just a proceeding to see if he's going to go to trial so you can see all the evidence. That's where the defense comes in and says, hey, no, you shouldn't convict him. You need a reasonable doubt, and we have a real case, and we find out what happened. The grand jury is, hey, do you have anything to bring this guy to trial? You can indict, like I said, almost anything or anybody in the country if you want to. The prosecutor has full discretion. In his discretion, instead of indicting him, he says, oh, here's a wonderful witness who says the cops had to do it. It was so reasonable. Now, if you're in the jury, what are you going to think? The prosecutor's telling me not to indict. He's telling me over and over again not to do it. Here are more evidence. The family said, first of all, they accused the prosecutor of, quote, abusing and manipulating the grand jury process to orchestrate a vote against indictment. And by the way, you understand why they go to a grand jury? So they can say, oh, I didn't say not to indict. I didn't make that decision. I asked the grand jury, and the grand jury said I shouldn't. That's a jury of his peers. They said I shouldn't indict. Oh, well, I threw the case. Yeah, very clever, very clever. So again, attorney for the family of Tamir Rice says, Prosecutor McGinty allowed the police officers to take the oath and read prepared statements to the grand jury without answering any questions on cross-examination, even though it is black letter law that taking the stand waives the Fifth Amendment right to be silent. The prosecutor did not seek a court order compelling the officers to answer questions or holding the officers in contempt if they continued to refuse. The way Prosecutor McGinty has mishandled the grand jury process has compounded the grief of this family. The idea that a prosecutor would allow someone who's accused of weighty matters here, and we're talking about homicide, that's the accusation. That's what we're seeing if we're going to have a trial over. The idea that he would allow the defendant to get up and say anything they want and not cross-examine them. Preposterous. They would never, ever, ever do that for anyone who wasn't a cop. But the cops are above the law, apparently, certainly in Cuyahoga County, certainly in Ohio. Watch out. If you live in Ohio, you're just driving through Ohio. Watch out. It's open season on you and your kids, and the prosecutors aren't going to do a damn thing about it. At what point would it have been reasonable to indict? If they shot Tamir Rice within 1 second? They shot him in 2 seconds. At what point do you say, hey, perhaps they acted unreasonably? Maybe it's not murder one, but maybe it's negligent homicide. Maybe, just maybe, they shouldn't have killed a kid in 2 seconds flat. You think you would have had a different conclusion if it was 1 second? No. There is no amount of time where apparently in Ohio, at least in this county, you can't shoot a 12-year-old and get away with it. They will find your actions reasonable almost no matter what. I don't know. They're not shooting a lot of 12-year-old whites, and I hope to God they don't. But you think they won't? They're above the law. They can shoot anybody they like. When they came for the blacks, what did you do? When they came for the Mexicans, what did you do? And the mentally disabled get shot more than anybody else in this country. When they came for them, the cops shot them because, it's a hassle to arrest this guy. Let's just murder him and move on with our lives. What did you do? So when they come for you and they come for your family, don't be surprised, because if you live in this area, you sanctioned it. You allowed this prosecutor to destroy the law, destroy justice, and say, well, I don't know, I guess he was under some sort of threat. So the next time somebody else is killed in 2 seconds, and it might be someone you know or part of your family, don't complain. You thought it was great when it happened to other people. If you don't think it's great, then do something about it. Should McGinty be fired? At a minimum. At a minimum. What kind of negligence is this on the actions of a so-called prosecutor? Of course he should be fired. Is there going to be any real justice? The only question is if federal prosecutors can do anything about this. But once it goes federal, it is much, much harder to prove, and they know it. That's why they snicker in their corners about getting away with it. Oh, they had to do it. It was so reasonable to kill that kid in 2 seconds. Reasonable my ass. They say black people in this country are angry. They're not nearly angry enough. Nobody should ever take the law into their own hands. You shouldn't become the monsters you fight against. Unfortunately, in this case, the cops, the prosecutors are those monsters. Young Turks.
Timothy Lohman was the Ohio cop who shot and killed 12-year-old Tamir Rice while he was playing with a toy gun in the park. Now, what made this story so outrageous was that Rice was shot and killed within 2 seconds of Timothy Lohman showing up to the scene. We're gonna show you the video, and I wanna warn you, you see a 12-year-old getting shot here, and obviously that's a difficult thing for a lot of people to watch. But with that warning, I wanna just give you this video to show you exactly what happened. You see Tamir Rice, he's at the park, he's playing with a toy gun. You're about to see the cop car show up, and literally within 2 seconds, Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old, is shot and killed. Now, a grand jury refused to charge Timothy Lohman, and he was fired from the police station that he worked at, and he ended up working for, a department in a rural part of Ohio. But now it appears that his attorney is trying to get him rehired. The city of Cleveland's arbiter in the Timothy Lohman case ruled in December that he could remain fired from the department, or that he should remain fired from the department. CPPA President Jeff Fulmer, this is the union representing him, said at the time that Lohman lost his arbitration over being fired, not for shooting Tamir, but for lying on his application to Cleveland police. So he had lied on his application, and that's the reason he got fired. It wasn't because he had shot and killed a 12-year-old within 2 seconds of showing up to the scene. I mean, that alone is crazy, but what did he lie about in his application? Well, apparently, previously, he got in trouble at a different police department. He had been with he had been with the Cleveland Police Department for 8 months. He had left his previous job with Suburban Independence Police Department after 6 months, when he was allowed to resign following a series of incidents where supervisors determined he was unfit to be a police officer. He, again, lied in his application, did not include information about that for obvious reasons.
He cited personal reasons as the reason that he left that office, not that they were on the verge of firing him because he's mentally unstable. Like, I mean, I had to look it up. Like, what exactly was he doing? And it was floored. Like, they're worried about his handling of guns. They're worried about him being able to maintain concentration. They said that he was mentally unfit, that bouts of crying, and it just was, lack of maturity was one of the things that just the statement from one of them there. They said that, I do not believe time nor training will be able to change or correct these deficiencies about him. And then he went and got another job in a bigger city. And it's still he should be in jail.
And
Should be, yes.
Yeah.
And that is the kind of stuff that you put in a report. Like that's translating what's wrong with this guy into how do you write that in a report? That is that's code for this guy should be nowhere near it. And neither time nor training means literally this dude is incapable of being a reasonable police officer and acting responsibly.
Yeah.
What's crazy is that the police union in this case is fighting so aggressively to get this guy rehired, even though he has a history of issues with other police departments, even though he had, lied on his application. But more importantly, he shot and killed a 12-year-old within 2 seconds of showing up to the scene. Like, he asked no questions. There were no questions asked. An innocent child was shot and killed, and the union is fighting to get this guy rehired. Now, Tamir Rice's mother is understandably outraged by this, and she got the community together. She has a petition that over 170,000 individuals have signed, and she delivered it to the police department, hoping that they don't rehire him. Right now, it's uncertain what will end up happening. Hopefully, the police department does the right thing and they refuse to rehire him. He is unfit to be a cop, and he absolutely should have been prosecuted and should have stood trial. The fact that that grand jury refused to do that is just gross.
Right.
Yeah.
Just count your blessings. Don't try to get another job. It's absurd for so many reasons.
Yeah, and it's just every little, one of those reasons is rather than say that what's wrong with him is what he did, and all the things about him that they had found previously were disqualifying in terms of whether he should be a police officer or not. And then they just well, for the purposes of this, we're just gonna say he lied. That's why we reject him, is because he lied on his application. Because those are those moments where you look at it and you go, all right, what would a reasonable person do? Because that's most of the law anyway. A reasonable person would assume, a reasonable person would think this or that. A reasonable person would say, well, he shot a kid in 2 seconds.
Right.
That's unreasonable. Also, everybody said that the things that were on his evaluation were messed up. A reasonable person would not say, well, he did lie on paperwork.
You're right.
What's so frustrating is that they probably did the only thing that would give them a fight against the police union, because they can't use the shooting, unfortunately, because he wasn't even charged. They can't say, oh yeah, we knew about all of this and all of this, but we decided that you were okay. So it has to be something that they didn't punt.
I mean, when you see how often this happens, you know, how many times have we seen video of a suspect literally running away from the cop? So they are not posing an imminent threat to the cop. They get shot in the back, and the cop who does the shooting doesn't end up having to face trial. The grand jury decides, or if they do face trial, they're found not guilty. So let's be clear on when cops can use lethal force, because they're supposed to only open fire if someone poses an imminent threat. But how many times have they opened fire when someone does not actually pose an imminent threat? How many unarmed people have been shot and killed? It's out of control.
It is.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, it's out of control, and it also sends a message. And look, not all cops are terrible people, right?
For sure.
But this does send a message to the bad cops that you can keep doing this, or you can do this and you'll get away with it, that there are no consequences for you. And that is incredibly disturbing.
There has to be some sort of a responsibility on the officer, because this happens too often. You have to know within yourself if you are capable of doing this job, because this is a job where your life and other people's lives, your partner's lives, your fellow officers and people, human beings that you're supposed to protect. And there should be some standard. I think that they have to be responsible. If you are spooked so easily by a 12-year-old, by someone who looks like a child to everyone, and a lot of people love to say that, like, you know, older black kids don't look like a child, and I don't buy that. But this 12-year-old looked like a kid. Yeah. He looks like a baby. He looks like a kid.
In some reports, they literally said he was reported to have looked 20. Like,
which is
you've seen the picture.
I've seen the picture of him. He looked like a baby.
He looked like a baby.
His face wasn't even like, he didn't have. You couldn't see like bone structure. But he looks like a kid.
He didn't even wait to look at his face.
Exactly.
That's the issue. You know?
Exactly. If you are spooked like that, you know that you're not capable of doing this job. Just because it's a well-paying job doesn't mean that you deserve it. There has to be a responsibility, and you know that you're scared of the dark. You know, you've seen this. You've talked to these people. They've been very clear about it. You remember crying in the police cruiser that day to your supervisor. You remember not being stable enough to handle your weapon. You remember all of this is things that he did. You remember leaving your gun in an unlocked locker. You remember all of these things, and there has to be the responsibility that when you do these things, when these things are pointed out to you, when you know yourself that kids scare you, that black people scare you, that you're shaky, you're kind of one of those people that you should not be a police officer.
Right.
The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.
Timothy Loman is the cop who killed a 12-year-old by the name of Tamir Rice because he had a toy gun. Now, at the time, Timothy Loman argues that he didn't know that it was a toy gun, and a person had called a dispatcher, 911, to report that there was a kid playing with a gun, but told the dispatcher it could be a toy gun. They didn't know, right? Well, it didn't matter. At this point, Timothy Loman shows up and within 2 minutes shoots and kills Tamir Rice. Now, we have the video of the incident.
2 seconds.
In 2 seconds, I'm sorry, I said 2 minutes. 2 seconds.
Oh, cops waiting 2 minutes to kill someone? Are you crazy?
So I did misspeak. But we do have a video of it that shows you the incident so you can see it for yourself. And then I'm going to give you some background information on Timothy Loman that has just come out. Now, the video is graphic. I want to give you guys that warning. But with that said, take a look.
All right, so there's a kid, and he's playing with a toy gun. Now, it got called in, and the guy who called it in said it's probably a toy gun, and it's a kid, but I don't know. It could be a real gun, it could be a toy gun. The cops claim the dispatcher didn't relay that piece of information to them, so they pull up right there, right next to him, boom, gone.
No questions asked. There was no put your hands up, put the guns down, or put the gun down, and they just immediately started shooting.
I mean, I barely had time to say gone by the time they pulled up.
Yeah.
Right? They shot him so quick. I mean, how could they have possibly seen what he was doing? What kind of, if it was a toy or not a toy? And why are you pulling all the way up there? Why don't, like, hey, if you want to be safe, right? They always say, and this guy, he said it too. He said, I had no choice, right? Here's a choice. You park by the curb, right? You go get behind your hood, you point the guns at him and say, freeze.
Right.
Right? That way you're perfectly safe, right? There's a choice.
Yeah.
And then he says, oh, it's a toy gun, and puts it down. Hey, there was a choice right there. But they didn't do that. They engaged right away.
It's just another case of shoot first, ask questions later. And unfortunately, it did end up being a toy gun. When it comes to airsoft guns, usually there's a fluorescent yellow strip on it that will indicate that it's not a real gun. And that was not on the gun, okay, or on the airsoft gun. So that's important information you should know. Nonetheless, it turns out that 2 years prior to this incident happening, Timothy Lohman was target shooting for a different police department, okay? It was the City of Independence Police Department in Independence, Ohio. And apparently they filed a report against him, deeming him unfit to be a police officer. Let me give you the details. City of Independence Police Department in Independence, Ohio, for 6 months in 2012. In the internal memo from that November, Independence Deputy Chief Jim Pollock criticized Lohman's behavior during a firearms training. He said the following: he could not follow simple directions, could not communicate clear thoughts nor recollections, and his handgun performance was dismal. He also said, according to the report, Lohman became distracted and weepy, in part because of an issue with a girlfriend and uncertainty about his future. Pollock criticized Lohman for being not mature enough in his accepting of responsibility or his understanding in the severity of his loss of control on the range, and concluded the report with recommending that Lohman be released from his position.
And I think the last quote here is the one that's most devastating. He said, "I do not believe time nor training will be able to change or correct the deficiencies." That's, of course, another way of saying he's hopeless. Okay, he shouldn't be a cop, and they were going to let him go. He steps down instead, right away, of course, getting wind of this, right, so that he preserves his chance of being a cop elsewhere. Goes to Cleveland. Now, it's unclear whether Cleveland checked this on his record or asked his previous employer. They hire him, and what does he do? He does the exact things that this other cop, by the way, is a good cop, could tell that this guy had issues, right? It warned about it. He said, don't trust this guy. This guy is hopeless. He's never going to learn. He's all wrong, right? And Cleveland makes him a cop anyway, and what does he do? He shoots a 12-year-old within 2 seconds of arrival.
It's kind of incredible, because what's the point of doing these reports if it's not going to have an impact on whether or not someone is employed as a police official? As someone who's going to be armed, as someone who is given the responsibility to protect and serve, there should be, the most comprehensive background checks imaginable. This could have been prevented so easily, but of course there was a lack of oversight, and as a result, you have this guy who was deemed unfit to be a police officer 2 years prior, shooting and killing a 12-year-old within 2 seconds.
Look, if I'm a guy who's hiring a cop, and there's another cop who is in charge of that area, okay, Independence, Ohio in this case, that says neither time nor training could ever correct this guy, I'd say, whoa, wow, this guy must be terrible, right? Imagine if I got that, and cops deal with life and death all the time. If I got that note about anyone, an editor, a graphics guy, and somebody said neither time nor training will ever fix how bad this guy is, of course I wouldn't hire him. Of course I wouldn't, right? But cop? Yeah, come on in.
A Quick Stop owner in Miami put up 16 surveillance cameras around his store, not because he wanted to keep himself safe, but because he believed that cops were racially profiling his employees and doing unnecessary stops and frisks. The plural version of it sounds weird. But anyway, what he was able to document was a year's worth of harassment from police officials. At least that's what he's alleging. And just to give you one specific example of that, there's this one employee he has. He's a 28-year-old by the name of Earl Sampson, and he has been stopped by cops 258 times in 4 years. And he's been searched more than 100 times and arrested 56 times. Now, there was only one time where he was actually charged with something, and it was a low-level marijuana possession charge. However, all the other times he was arrested, it was for trespassing. Keep in mind, he works there as a clerk. Yeah. So now the Quick Stop owner is filing.
That many times without doing something about it.
A black person. That's what
Yeah,
happens.
because what are you going to do about it? Yeah. You don't have any money. Like you don't have the money to hire a team of lawyers and stuff and go after the guys.
Yeah, you're totally right.
Unbelievable. Now, Alex Saleh, he's the person who owns the Quick Stop, says that he is going to file a federal civil rights lawsuit, and I think that he should, especially if he has a year's worth of surveillance indicating that these officers officers were doing that.
The case is over on Earl Sampson alone.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't stop a guy 1,000 times.
So, but what's weird about this story is I heard on Fox News that there was no racism left in the country.
Yeah, it's nice.
So
Careful, that guy's getting away with a secret compartment.
I know.
Get after him.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Oh my god.
Wow, and that guy works there?
Mm-hmm. Oh.
So what they do? Just came in and got him?
It looked like he was taking out the garbage for the store, and then they're like, "Oh, you stepped outside and you were black, so come with us." How is that possible? But that's the amazing thing, right? And thank God he videotaped it. Because people wouldn't have believed it. You think they would have believed it? They'd be like, they're liberals, they're making it, or whatever. All blacks, they're making it up. I don't even know what Alex Saleh is. I don't know what race he is, right? But I'm glad that he was like tired of this nonsense.
He's throwing out the trash.
Right.
It's unbelievable. I love that he has a year's worth of surveillance, because how are you going to argue with that? You know, if he does in fact have that, then there's no way that he's going to lose this case. Look at that cop. It's unbelievable.
I think this cop is just pissed that he's not getting free donuts.
Yeah.
I think that's like the whole story.
Yeah, I think he's juice fasting and he's just in a really
He's just
shitty
a bad mood.
Yeah.
But
It is so messed up, though, honestly.
One more serious thing about this. They arrested him dozens of times, as Anna pointed out, for trespassing in the store that he works, which means that they knew the first time that it was the store that he worked. After the first time, that at most, like, you go, oh, my bad, I didn't know, right?
Yeah.
That means, oh, no, we're going to harass you to no end for no reason, even though it's not like you're a bum. You're working at that store. I know you're working at that store. I'm going to come and arrest you for trespassing anyway, along with the 257 other times that I stopped you in the last 4 years. But there's no such thing as racism. There was just, I'm sure it was all wild coincidence, and it never happens anywhere in the country, because I know, because Barack Obama was elected president.
That's right. That's right. And if you want to simply talk about stop and frisk, the way some reasonable people in New York support the law, because the law started at around kind of the same time that crime went down, even though there are enormous other reasons for why crime went down. But you feel safer, and it's a part of aggressive policing, and it's not they're not hitting anybody. So I get why there's an initial reaction of some reasonable New Yorkers to support the law. But it's incredibly short-sighted, because the problem is that there's no recourse to stop it. Like this guy, Earl Sampson. I mean, I was kidding at first, but Cenk, of course you're correct.
Yeah.
What is he going to do? Nothing. And the cop can keep going in there even though he knows it, because here's what is never going to happen. No one is ever going to go up to that cop and say, stop arresting Earl Sampson. There's nothing to be done. All that happens is he arrests Earl Sampson, they search him for drugs, they go, hey, I assume they have some basic reason, like they're like, hey, what are you hearing? There's a couple of break-ins over on 7th Street, who did it? And he's like, I don't know, it was at work, right? And they're like, okay. And they turn him loose, and that's it. And they never have to answer for anybody for that, because what they just did is legal, and that's crazy.
Yeah.
And maybe they think that they're running some drug operation out of the store, and that's why they're bothering the workers, etc. But if the guy's running a drug operation there, it takes some balls on his part to videotape the cops and then sue them in court.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And even so, when you arrest him for trespassing at his own work, etc., you got nothing on him.
No.
You didn't find anything on him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And look, I'm sorry, I keep going back to Beverly Hills. They couldn't do it in Beverly Hills. They just couldn't do it. Even if they thought they had the guy, And imagine they go into, Goldman Sachs in New York City and arrest the bankers who did the fraudulent deals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, look, we don't have anything on you because we couldn't prove that it was fraud. But we're going to stop and bring you into the police station 258 times over the next 4 years.
If a cop in New York, a progressive cop, just started stopping and frisking bankers.
Oh my God.
Do you have the degree to which he would be fired?
Yeah, totally.
I mean,
He'd be fired immediately, like within the first 3 seconds
he's like,
of
just
attempting
applying
it.
stop and frisk.
Yeah, if a cop started doing stop and frisk on Wall Street, literally would be fired in a day and a half. Okay.
Yeah. I think you're being generous, Dana.
Yeah, and so but the story goes to perspective.
And like he'd be like reasonable suspicion. These guys tank the economy. I have plenty of suspicion.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way,
what trades
emails.
did you make? Who talked to you about these trades? You get any tips on these trades? Was there any inside trading involved? It sounds like it's just my suspicion. So I'm just going to pat you down a little bit. I'm going to take you in, ask you some questions. I got nothing. I'll turn you loose.
Oh, by the way, look, I patted you down. I found $1 billion you took from the taxpayers. Okay, JR.
we like a little bit of wild speculation. I know you can't hear me, but what's his name? Earl Sampson? Is that his name?
Earl Sampson.
Earl Sampson had sex with one of those cops' daughters.
He must have done something to really irritate that cop. I don't know what it is.
We've all been harassed. We've all been, profiled while driving while black. It's happened to me many times. But the numbers behind this are outrageous.
Yeah.
Like, this is a concerted police effort. He's like, hey guys, Earl Sampson works at the Quick Stop. He had sex with my daughter. Let's go get him. Let's bother him for the rest of this year. This is way further than anything I've ever heard before.
Yeah.
Also, maybe this guy's just doing it because he's like, look, you keep taking my employee in. I need him working.
Yeah.
You're costing me money. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, again, Beverly Hills store owner complains about the cops arresting his employee for trespassing while they're working at his shop. Again, maximum of a day and a half before that cop gets fired.
My name's Matt Thompson. We're here in Franklin County today protesting for wrongful convictions and for all the people that are wrongfully in prison. Jeff Winehouse was known as the Bulletin Man, and he criticized the government and thought they were corrupt, and was looking into suspicious activities of the sheriff of Crawford County. And he was running for coroner of Crawford County in order to conduct an inquest into wrongful shootings by the sheriff of Crawford County at that time. The cousin of the sheriff that Jeff was investigating, who was a lieutenant in the Missouri Highway Patrol, started a raid on Jeff's house. They took his computers so that he could no longer publish. A week or so later, they invited him into an ambush where he was shot.
How's it going, Jeff?
Good, how are you?
What you got the gun for?
Why did I got the gun? What you got the gun for?
Because I'm an authorized to have a gun.
All right, well, I'm authorized to have
Get down on the ground. Get down on the ground.
You're gonna have to shoot me, man.
He was shot twice in the head and twice in the chest, and he should have died. But miraculously, he survived through prayer and other things. He was in the hospital for over a month. The authorities never came to the hospital, but 3 weeks after he got out, they arrested him. And they convicted him of assaulting the officer who assaulted him.
We need justice for Jeff Winehouse now. Walk for justice. It could be you.
There is a lot of corruption to unravel here, and that's why we're here today. So thank you.
Good, how are you?
What you got the gun for?
Why did I got the gun? What you got the gun for?
Because I'm an authorized to have a gun.
All right, well, I'm authorized to have
Get down on the ground.
Get on the ground.
Get down on the ground.
You're gonna have to shoot me, man. You still got the gun, Scott. I got it. Yeah, police, FBI, Highway Patrol.
He's down.
What you just witnessed was the shooting of Jeff Winehouse by state police and FBI. Jeff Winehouse is a patriot, a journalist, an activist, who they lured into a meeting and then gunned him down and tried to murder him. Miraculously, Jeff survived. And miraculously, he had a camera on his wrist that recorded the whole incident. Despite all of that, the men who tried to murder Jeff Winehouse were not charged. Rather, Jeff was charged with assaulting officers with a deadly weapon. Jeff was convicted in a court, not given due process, and sentenced to 30 years in prison, where he sits right now. Now, in recent weeks, as we look at the growing tyranny, we look at the assassination of Lavoy Finicum and the arrest of our patriot brothers and sisters, we see the sacrifice that people make for liberty. And we have to start asking ourselves the hard questions. They murdered Lavoy in cold blood, and they tried to murder Jeff Winehouse in cold blood. And the message here is the same. A treasonous, lawless government abuses the people, it abuses the innocent, and it tries to exert unstoppable authority over the people. And it falls to us to stop that. This falls on us because we've allowed this government, and now we're waking up to the fact that as it gets worse and worse and worse, it's actually been happening for a long time. And as our courts get worse and worse and worse, we need to recognize that this is not a nation of laws anymore. We still have our Constitution, we still have our God-given rights, but the government acts in complete lawlessness. We shouldn't deceive ourselves into thinking that once we get into the court system, we're going to be given due process, because we're not. The corrupt courts and the corrupt government are going to control every step of the process. They're going to lock us in cages and put us in solitary confinement and control the jury and the evidence. They're going to put principled, peaceful patriots like Ammon and the others in prison. They're going to arrest journalists like Pete and lock them away because they didn't carry the government's message. They're going to do things just like they did to Lavoy and just like they did to Jeff, until we, the people, recognize that this is a government by the consent of the governed. That we allowed this. We allowed good to be turned into evil and light to be called darkness. We allowed the unborn and our neighbor and the innocent and the weak and the fatherless to be abused, and we have to step up because liberty is gone in this country. And if we want our children to have liberty, to have that freedom, we have to restore it. So our appeal may be to heaven. That's where mine is. But we must stand boldly. We must not be silent. We must not be still. And we must take action for liberty, or it will be forever lost to us.
It's a story we brought you on Monday. Take a look at this video again. You see a mom on her front lawn screaming for police to stop punching her son. The woman had called to have her emotionally disturbed son taken to the hospital. Well, Bogota police officer Regina Tasca responded along with her backup, 2 police officers from the Ridgefield Park Police Department. It's the officers from Ridgefield Park that are seen delivering the beating right there. And in this photograph taken by the young man's mother, you see the Officer Tasca, trying to remove the officer off the victim. So they are joining us here live, and what sounds like, heroic actions on part of the officer trying to get this all happening. Well, it turns out Officer Tasca might just cause or lose her job with the police department, and she joins us this morning. So thank you so much for being here, Regina, and you're also here with your lawyer, Kathy Elston. So take us back to when you arrived, because, I tried to set up the piece. So you get a call, emotionally disturbed boy, mom there, and needs your help. So take us back to that.
We get a call that the mother wants her son to be evaluated at one of the local hospitals. Get there. I have a backup officer from Ridgefield Park, because there's only 2 of us on the road. Another town comes in to assist. I'm talking to the individual who's emotionally disturbed.
Right.
During that time, he says, I don't understand why there's another police officer here. With that, he starts to pace to the left. He says, I just don't understand why there's another department here. After that, the Ridgefield Park officer automatically just takes him down, because he started to walk 2 feet to the left or to the right, whatever it was. Another Ridgefield Park officer comes in and runs out of his car and just starts punching him in the head.
Now, your dash cam is rolling this whole time, catching this.
Yes.
And you hear it very, very clearly. You're screaming, stop, stop, stop. And there's another eyewitness. There's the mother as well.
Correct.
So at this point, what's going on through your head? Are you trying to pull him off? How are you trying to quell the situation?
I'm actually trying to remove the one officer on top of Kyle, because they're punching him in the head. They're using excessive force that they don't need to. The kid was being transferred to the hospital. It was a simple medical call that they just first jumped on top of, then the other Ridgefield Park started beating up.
All right, so do you go back to the precinct, and then what happens next? The unexpected happens.
Well, after I bring the kid up to the hospital, I went in the ambulance with the kid. A couple days later, my captain calls me in and he says, we need to speak to you. Go in there to speak to him. He says, you need to turn over your service weapon and your badge. You're being suspended immediately from duty.
Why were you suspended? Why weren't you put on desk duty pending investigation? Why were you suspended right away?
Because I wasn't backing the fact that another officer use excessive force.
Wow. Okay, so are you saying that we're talking about crossing the blue line? Is that what you're...
Absolutely.
You're saying because you didn't stand up for another officer...
Correct.
And you told what was actually happening...
Right.
That you are now in the process of possibly losing your job?
Yes.
Okay. So where do we stand here? You know, what is she being charged with? Where does this go from here?
Well, Siggy, Regina's been charged with a number of violations, but one of them is that she's psychologically unfit for duty. When Regina made it clear that she was going to tell the truth about what happened at the scene and what she saw, she was taken off duty. She was sent for a psychological fitness for duty exam, and that's part of the charges that she's facing now, that she's psychologically unfit.
Okay. Do you feel like you're being targeted?
Absolutely.
Do you feel like you're being targeted because you want to go against the boys, or are you calling it a boys' club?
Calling it a boys' club for sure. I'm being targeted because, like you say, I went against another officer because he was using excessive force on an emotionally disturbed individual. It was just way too much excessive force.
All right. I hear you. I know you're sticking to your ground and standing your ground, saying you did the right thing. You have your lawyer. We want to say that your hearing is going to be in May. And we'll definitely keep you updated on the final outcome of what happens to you. And please keep us posted. And thank you so much for coming here live and sharing your story.
Thank you.
And we appreciate hearing your voice. It is 7:18. Let's talk about the weather this morning. It's already 57 degrees, and it looks like it might go up to a high of 63. Linda?
All right, we're right here at the motherfucking Walmart. Can I do video?
Not of me.
No, I'm not doing. I'm doing of the sign of Walmart. Not of you. Not of you. I promise. Oh yeah. Do this. We had the motherfucking Walmart, the beach nut between Beach Nut and Bissonnette, and the reason why I'm recording is because all the carts.
Come here. You see your ID.
Hang on, sir.
Nah,
Nobody has to show any ID, sir. Nobody has to show any ID, sir.
Yeah, you gotta show ID.
Sir, you're grabbing me? Are you serious? Calm down.
Put it down.
Are you serious? You're about to tase me?
Look,
you're about to tase me?
I want you. Get your hand
Hey!
off me.
Don't tase me, sir. Don't tase me, sir.
Look at this.
What's wrong with you?
Are you seeing this?
Put that down.
Sir, I am harmful. I am
down.
I am not.
We're leaving. Don't resist.
We're leaving.
Give me the phone. You're not going anywhere now.
We are leaving.
You put your hands on me, and now you're not going anywhere.
I didn't even touch you one time, sir. I haven't touched you one time.
Let me see your ID right
Ma'am,
now.
please
Let
help
me
me.
see your ID right now.
That's the cop right there.
Turn that off.
It's off. It's not even.
Let me
it's not
see
even
it. Give
recorded.
it to me.
Sir, you don't have to take my phone. That has nothing to do with this. Hang on a second. I can pull out my ID. I can comply with what you're saying.
No, you're not complying with what I'm saying.
I don't understand why you're angry right
because
now.
Because you're videotaping me, and I want to know who you are. That's why
I was videotaping the grocery cart because they're all out here.
I'm not even a hostile person. I don't even have a.
Yeah, you are hostile.
I'm not.
Because you're non-compliant with me.
Non-compliant does not mean hostile. It means non-compliant, and I'm not being non-compliant.
Let me see your ID.
Here's my ID.
Let me see your ID too.
I was gonna give it to you, sir.
Calm down. We're nice people.
Yeah. I was videotaping because at a Walmart and we were just.
Yeah, I've already been hurt here once today.
Well, we're not those people, sir.
Well, you'll put your hands on me, okay? You'll put your hand up to stop me from what I'm doing, okay?
Well, I'm sorry I scared you, but we're not hostile people. And you don't have
fool
to.
me.
You don't have to be playing, the authority game and things. We understand.
I don't think you
exactly
do.
how it is.
Apparently you don't.
I haven't broken the law, sir. So, and neither has my friend.
you have.
And we're complying with you right now.
At this point, you can go to
we
jail.
have not
Do you
broken
understand?
any law at all.
Don't tell me. Don't tell me.
We know our rights. We know the Constitution, sir. We know the Constitution.
Okay, you know what?
Do I sound illiterate?
I'm calling for a unit right now. We'll see how well you know the Constitution. Okay?
What's the unit gonna? What are they gonna do? Take me to jail for knowing the Constitution?
Whatever.
For standing for my freedom?
Bro, it's not even worth it. We can know what we know. It is what it is. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Okay? We didn't do anything wrong. We weren't doing anything wrong whatsoever. So.
You resisted.
No, we did not.
Yeah,
sir.
you did.
No, we did not. You were about to tase me. And
we
you have
seem-
no
we seem
clue.
hostile.
You have no clue. You were about to tase us. You were about to tase us for no reason. For
no reason. You put your hands on me.
I didn't put my hand on you
Put your hands on the police.
whatsoever. And I know we have witnesses out here.
You're on video from the store.
Perfect, beautiful.
And I have a
Even
witness
better.
tell.
Even better. Even better. Because you were about to tase somebody you didn't even know what I go through, sir. You might have could have killed me. I'm a dialysis patient, sir.
Okay.
You could have tased me and made my blood pressure go up.
I want you to watch something that seems to show some police brutality. It also seems to show some deceptiveness, if not some downright lying. And it also seems to even suggest that there may be a cover-up going on. And when we see these things, we want to point them out to you. Let me take you back to when this happened, all right? I'm going to do the setup, and then I'm going to let you watch a tape. It happened March 3rd. This is in College Park, Maryland. Maryland has just played Duke. Duke, as you know now, is the best team in the country in college basketball. And Maryland beats them, by golly. And the students are crazy happy that they've beaten the best team in the land. So they go out and they start celebrating and partying, as college kids are known to do. Then the police show up. Wait till you see what was caught on tape. Roll it, Raj.
On the video, University of Maryland student John McKenna first appears skipping down the sidewalk next to Knox Road. He is singing a cheer celebrating Maryland's basketball win over Duke when he comes face to face with a Park Police mounted officer. He stops dead in his tracks and actually backs up. Watch carefully what happens now as he is slammed into the wall, knocked unconscious, and then beaten more than a dozen times by Prince George's County police officers. McKenna's lawyers say there is only one way to characterize what happened.
This is police brutality, pure and simple.
And Griffith says the actual beating is only half the story. This is the sworn statement of charges against McKenna by the police. It alleges assault on a police officer and disorderly conduct. It claims that McKenna, quote, struck those officers and their horses, causing minor injuries, and that McKenna was, quote, kicked by the horses and sustained minor injuries.
Clearly, the charging document is a lie. As you can see from the tape, there's not a single fact in that statement of charges that's true.
We showed the video and charging document to Prince George's County Police Major Andy Ellis today. He says the Police Internal Affairs Office will begin an immediate investigation.
There are things in that video that concern me, Brad, and we're going to take a look at it.
Federal investigators will also be looking at the tape to determine if civil rights violations occurred. County prosecutors may now pursue assault charges when the officers involved are identified.
This is unbelievable. That was Brad Bell from our affiliate WJLA. He's joining me now from New York is retired Nassau County Police Officer Lou Palumbo. He's with the Elite Group, LTD. Lou, I don't even know what to say after watching that, because aside from the fact that it appears that the police officers may very well be wrong, their story about what they say happened seems to make it doubly wrong, does it not?
Yeah, I think what we learn in life, it's never the crime, it's the cover-up. And I think they obviously were unaware that they were being videotaped. There isn't any question, Rick, and normally I will not go out on a limb.
We're looking at the video here. This is where police officers say he struck them. Does it look to you like he struck them or did something to that horse?
Rick, I'm going to surmise this whole thing for you, that you're going to see arrests of these police officers, criminal prosecutions, lawsuits, and you may have the FBI involved in investigating this under what we would call color of authority. There is nothing in that young man's actions that should have precipitated this type of encounter with this law enforcement agency.
Well, here's what they've told us, and we have been calling them all day today. They have released a statement now essentially saying that, in fact, they will drop the charges against this young man, and that at least one officer has been suspended, and that two others will possibly be suspended. When we asked if charges are going to be filed, they said no, we're only looking at suspensions at this point. When we asked if they would be suspended with pay or without pay, they said with pay. I don't know about you, but I think people listening to what I just said would be appalled.
Well, what they're doing here, Rick, is that they're taking a bad situation and making it worse, because just as you and I are reviewing this tape, so is the FBI. That's all I'm going to say to you. And one of the things you cannot do is lie during an investigation, and they've already started to do that. So You're going to see basically these officers terminated, criminally charged, the parents of this poor young man suing this police department, and you know, it's just a black eye and an embarrassment to law enforcement, because this is an anomaly, fortunately.
But Lou, you're a cop. You've got experience with this. When are they going to learn? Why is it taking so long? People right now watching this tape, I guarantee you, are wanting these guys to be in jail, and yet they're not even naming the names of the police officers. They said there's one suspended, 2 others maybe, and they're not quite sure who they are. You know they know who they are.
Rick, all I'm going to tell you is that at times the wheels of justice turn slow, but they turn. And I will tell you flat out and unequivocally, you're going to see loss of employment. You may see the removal of the head of this agency. You have to understand the condition that exists in all walks of life, whether it's journalism, law enforcement, Wall Street. The fish thinks from the head down. Whatever is tolerated by the chief administrator of this law enforcement agency is going to basically translate to his employment. And there's nothing that you can say that explains what went on here. And as we already have identified, they've started the cover-up by, how would you say, dissemination of inaccurate or untruthful information. And I'm embarrassed, having been a former law enforcement agent, to have to look at a tape like this. Seldom do you see this, fortunately.
Wow, strong words coming from you. Listen, my thanks to you for your candor, and I should let you know, Lou, and maybe we'll get back in touch with you later. I know the president's going to be speaking, so we've got a lot of stuff to get on the show. But one of the spokespersons, perhaps an officer from this department, that's Prince George's County, is going to be joining us here at the top of the 4 o'clock show, so in about 40 minutes or so. We'll see what he says, and I might want to get back to you on this. You're going to be available?
Absolutely.
All right. If nothing else, maybe we'll just get you on the horn. Thanks a lot, Lou. We appreciate your time.
An Action News exclusive. He fought in Iraq only to be attacked here on U.S. soil.
I'm defending my life here.
A soldier squares off with Metro Police at McCarran International Airport. You won't believe what happens next.
The look in his eyes was just rage.
It is a violent clash caught on video. You will only see it right here on Action News.
And tonight it has the Metro Police Department facing some tough questions about its use of force. Action News reporter Ben Deasy has more in an exclusive Contact 13 investigation.
It's NASCAR weekend, just days before Sergeant Mark England's National Guard unit is about to deploy. England comes to Las Vegas for a little fun before going off to war, but ends up finding himself in combat right here. Blow after blow. In the middle of McCarran Airport, the man swinging in this grainy video is a Metro cop. But is the man he's hitting a criminal or a security threat?
This is the Army Commendation Medal that I received for my service in Iraq.
Sergeant Mark England has seen more combat than many in the National Guard. He served in Bosnia and more recently Iraq. He's a medic.
We saw, sick people, hurt people, did that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Or we went on patrol with line units where we went out looking for the insurgents.
But Mark's wife, Juliana, says she's most troubled by the violence he faced here on American soil.
I was concerned because after I saw him and knew the injuries he had, that they didn't check him out. They slapped a couple Band-Aids on him and said, c'est la vie.
Now, see it for yourself for the first time in this video shot by security cameras at McCarran Airport. That's Mark England. When he tries to make it through security with a bottle of Sprite, a TSA agent pulls him out of line and then pulls rank on him.
She goes, well, you're a sergeant in the Army. I go, yes, sir. And he goes, well, I'm a lieutenant in the Army.
When England asks to see his military ID, the TSA agent refuses.
And I looked at him and I said, sir, with all due respect, that's effed up. Using the big F word.
England thought that was the end of it until he got to his gate and found out his plane had left without him. He says the soldier in him wanted answers, so he went back to talk with the TSA supervisor.
It was important to him. I said, let it go. He's probably just some jerk that works at the airport.
Juliana England says it's hard for her to think about what happened next. This is a surveillance video, and that's the Metro cop who came over when Mark England returned to the security checkpoint. He walks England off screen, but we pick him up on a different camera. There they are at the top of your picture. Watch as the Metro officer pulls out his police baton. With a flourish, he spins the weapon and starts to swing.
The look in his eyes was just rage.
The beating is severe, according to England. He says he came away with a black and bloodied eye, 3 fractured ribs, cuts and scrapes all over his arms. And it's not long before the Metro officer has backup. That's his help running through the picture, and that's a taser gun he's drawing. Watch again as England's body crumples to the ground. That's when he says he was hit by the taser's crippling bolt of electricity.
It's indescribable. It's every single nerve cell in your body being lit on fire.
England claims the officer shot him not once, but 3 times with the taser gun. In a statement today, Metro told me it's all the subject of a, quote, ongoing internal affairs investigation. They said, we've reviewed the surveillance tape and do not believe our officers acted outside policy. Until now, we've been focusing on that confrontation here at the top of the screen. But the airport security camera isn't the only witness to all of this. Here in the foreground, a 3rd Metro officer has arrived, and he reacts much differently than you or I would to what he's seeing. The Metro officer is talking to a TSA agent about what's happening. You can see him mimic England's collapse with his hand, and then practically skip away from the conversation.
Yeah,
they're just laughing about it.
It's been 2 months since Sergeant Mark England had his run-in with Metro Police. He still hasn't been charged with any crime. And he says he hasn't been able to deploy back to Iraq either, partly because of the injuries he got here at McCarran Airport.
The weekend before I'm supposed to ship out my guys, I get my ribs caved in, and now I'm non-deployable.
Meanwhile, the 2 officers involved are still on the job, even while Metro's internal investigation is continuing. The Metro says they are investigating this incident thoroughly. The FBI also taking a look at this case. Steve?
Ben, does Metro have a specific policy on the use of tasers?
Yeah, well, as part of an investigation, we got a hold of Metro's policy on tasers, and it makes it pretty clear an officer should use a taser when he or she is facing aggressive resistance from a suspect.
All right, thank you, Ben. And Action News will continue to follow this story, including a closer look at Metro's taser policy. We'll also hear what the ACLU has to say about this story coming up tomorrow on Action News.
You're watching ABC 7 News at 5, on your side.
WJLA-TV yesterday filed a police brutality complaint with the Internal Affairs Division of the Prince George's County Police Department on behalf of one of our own, ABC 7 News I-Team reporter Andrea McCarran.
Andrea was injured during a police stop in the county last month while she was investigating a story. And Gordon Peterson joins us now to describe what happened. Gordon?
Kathleen Leon, on April 15th, ABC 7 investigative reporter McCarran and her photographer were checking out a tip about questionable use of police and government resources in Prince George's County. They were following a county government car driven by a police officer who appears to be a full-time driver for the county's chief administrative officer. McCarran was driving. Photographer Pete Hakel was in the back seat. Suddenly, they heard the wail of police sirens and saw flashing police lights. Back at ABC 7, managing editor Dan Patrick heard a call on the Prince George's County Police scanner.
Prince George's County Police were stopping a vehicle they said was suspicious in nature because there was someone videotaping them.
When we first heard sirens and saw flashing lights, we assumed it wasn't us, and then all of a sudden we're surrounded.
She's got a gun pulled on me.
Okay, that's right, that's fine. At gunpoint, McCarran did as she was told.
Face the front, ma'am. Now 1 second, stand by point.
With her hands up, she walked backwards to the sound of the officer's voice. Moments later, a police officer roughly pulled her arms behind her back. Did you tell him at any time he was hurting you?
I didn't say a thing, because as far as I knew, there were still guns trained on me.
But she was injured.
My shoulder felt like it was on fire.
McCarran's shoulder was wrenched from its socket. She may have to have surgery.
Drop the camera and yes, sir.
Meanwhile, our photographer had problems of his own. At least 3 officers had their weapons trained on him.
Keep backing up towards the sound of my voice. Just keep going. I'm backing.
Eventually, the police determined that this 5'4" 115-pound mother of 3 was not a threat, and they released her without a charge. But before she left, reporter McCarran had a question.
You got pulled over because citizen that you following. Excuse me. We're not saving this. I'm not giving an interview.
I think it's an obvious case of law enforcement intimidation.
Attorney Lucy Delglish is executive director of the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press.
What I don't quite understand is what would be even slightly illegal about driving around town with a video camera. There is nothing illegal about that whatsoever.
WJLA-TV has filed an official police brutality complaint alleging that Prince George's County police officers used excessive force against reporter McCarran. The complaint further alleges that the police officers may have known that McCarran was a journalist on assignment. If so, what we have here is a serious case of news media intimidation.
Well, I think as a legal matter, it's clear that her civil rights were violated. They cannot use their power to interfere with your constitutionally protected activities.
Prince George's County Police have refused our repeated requests for interviews. County spokesman Jim Carey told us they, meaning the police, had no suspicion that it was a news crew. The police department was responding to a call for a suspicious person following a police officer. There was a threat felt. As near as we can recreate it, this is what the officer saw in his rearview mirror when he called for assistance. In a post-9/11 world, can you understand the officer's apprehension looking back, seeing a vehicle he doesn't know driving behind him with something in the back seat?
I'm a mother of 3. Most of the time I drive a beat-up minivan. It's hard for me to perceive the sight of me as a threat.
Now 1 second, stand by point. With your hands up.
And that's the question. Did the officers have to use force? The incident occurred on April 15th. Why have we waited until now to report it? Well, according to ABC 7's Vice President of News, Bill Lord, we've been waiting for responses from the Prince George's County Police Department to requests for transcripts of the incident reports, radio transmissions, and email communications regarding this event. We've also requested dashboard videotapes from the 9 police cruisers on the scene, but we've been told that every single one of the federally required cameras was either inoperable or not running. Leon? Kathleen?
Dayton, Ohio. 17-year-old Brandy Martin's working the drive-thru. Working for minimum wage is bad enough, but it's about to get a lot worse. She takes an order for $3.64.
Hey, look, $3.64.
It's for a cop, Michael McDonald. He pays her and she gives him his change. Seems routine, right?
You're welcome.
Wrong. After McDonald pulls out, he thinks she shortchanged him. He's sure he gave her a 20, but he only got change for a 10.
Then he gave you a 20. Did she give her 86.35 back? I think I did. Or 86.36, I did give him his right change. He got me 10, he got me f***ed up.
Brandy's manager checks the cash register while the cop waits.
It was a 20 and a 10 spot, and he gave me a 20, but it was not, he gave me a 10. He gave me a 10. I didn't got no 20 in my head. Police man.
We have a 20 in your register. The manager tells the cop Brandy don't got no 20s, but the cop's still thinking she's holding out on him.
You can come and search me. I don't know if he's a police or not. I don't like police anyway. They should have took my brother.
Of course, Brandy's co-workers bust her chops.
You're right. I don't care about that police. Orange and shirt.
Uh-oh, 5-0 in the house. And he wants his 2-0.
I don't have your money. I don't care if you're police or not. I'm not coming over. You can't make me. You wait till my mama get here. I'm underage as far as that. You not gonna stay with no man.
Under arrest, you come with me.
Anyway.
No, anyway, nothing. You're under arrest.
Wait a minute, you talk to the manager for
I don't need to talk to your manager.
Don't holler at me. Do not holler at me. Wait till my mama get here.
Your mama don't have nothing to do with it.
My mama on her way. My mama on her way. Dad, I ain't thought this for real. I swear to God.
Somebody's got my money.
I ain't got your motherfucking money.
Out to the car.
I don't give a fuck. You can search me right here for it.
Out to the car.
I ain't coming up to no car.
The cop pepper sprays her full in the face.
You had your chance. Stand up. I gotta get out from back here.
Listen close. You can hear Brandy wheezing and trying to breathe. You can't take her to the police station because now she has to go to the hospital. Let's go back before all hell breaks loose. The cop pays Brandy. Freeze and zoom in. This slot's for ones, this one's for fives, this one's for tens, and this one's for 20s. Looks to us like she puts the bill in the $10 slot. The manager checks the drawer. He don't see no 20s neither.
You don't even have any 20s in your dresser.
The tape don't lie. Brandy's right, and the cop is wrong. Brandy files a case against the police department. Officer McDonald's cleared of any wrongdoing, but Brandy gets $60,000 bucks. It's another special moment in Dayton, Ohio.
I'm Sade Better-in-Law. New this half hour, a woman in Queens who says she was beaten and bruised by New York City police over a dispute about dog droppings. And tonight, the NYPD is investigating. And we want to warn you, some of the photos you're about to see are very graphic. Eyewitness News reporter Tim Fleischer is live in Rockaway Beach with more. Tim?
Sade, this story is both disturbing and very puzzling. 1 minute, this resident is out here walking her dog when she is confronted by two NYPD officers. But how does this escalate to a point where all of a sudden she's in handcuffs, arrested, and claims to have been beaten?
Nightmare.
That nightmare, Anna Steincheck tearfully recalls, was frightening, embarrassing, and left her with these painful injuries she claims came at the hands of two NYPD officers as she walked her beloved dog Satka outside her Rockaway Beach apartment building 12 days ago.
Two police officers said to me they saw how my dog pooped and they didn't clean up.
It surprised Anna. She told the officers Satka only urinated, but the officers from the 100 precinct pointed to a pile on the ground, telling her to pick it up, even though she says it clearly had been there a while.
I pick up because I got scared when they talked to me. They were very mean. And
she grew more upset and told the officers she did nothing wrong.
Police officer driver, he showed me handcuffs, and he said to me they can arrest me.
Which they did.
They put my hands in my back, and they pushed me in the back seat in the car.
And I screamed, "Stop!"
More chilling, though, is this description by a neighbor who did not want to appear on camera. Anna clearly becoming upset.
He leaned into the vehicle, into the back seat, and went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in her head and her chest.
In these pictures of Anna taken after her arrest, you can clearly see the heavy bruising around her eye and cheek, on her breast and back.
And the one punched me in my face, punched me in my back and breast. I just feel pain all over in my body.
Anna was charged by officers with resisting arrest and disorderly conduct. She is now pursuing the alleged beating through the Civilian Complaint Review Board.
I'm doing for protection for another people, because I think if they did it to me, they can do it for another people.
The NYPD has yet to respond to an email request for comment. The Queens District Attorney's Office, however, says it is investigating the matter jointly with the NYPD. Reporting live from Rockaway Beach, Tim Fleischer, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Nazi! Nazi! SS! Gestapo! Yes, Fourth Amendment! Freedom! It means nothing to you. You took an oath to the Constitution, and you don't uphold it. Shame on you. He waved at me. Get off my property. I don't want you here. I'm shutting my garage. Get out of my garage.
Listen, so now we get the right to interrogate you and not interrogate you, but we get
I got the right to remain silent.
All right, listen.
I invoke my right to remain silent, so.
I waved at you. Just, hey, how's it going? And you call me a Nazi?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you calling me a Nazi?
Because you're acting like one.
How am I acting like a Nazi doing my job? Get your ID handy? Do you have your ID? Because let me explain something to you. In the state of Arkansas, here, make sure you get the name, the badge number. State of Arkansas.
Get out of my garage. You're not welcome on my property. Neither one of y'all. Y'all are pulling people over from my house.
It doesn't work that way. You called me a Nazi.
And that is some kind of race hate crime or something?
I waited. You're calling me a Nazi and yelling and screaming at me when I'm walking to my car. Okay? That's disturbing the peace. That's disturbing.
You're disturbing my peace by waving at me.
Now I need to see your ID. I'm a law. Look, I've identified myself as a police officer. You know I'm a police officer.
No, I don't know that.
Okay.
And you're
well,
not
let me
welcome
explain
here.
something to you.
You need to get off my property.
I need to see your ID.
I'm standing in my garage.
Yes, sir, you are.
You are violating my Fourth Amendment. Show me a search warrant. You're in my property.
No.
You're not welcome here.
You.
You're not
so
welcome
I need your
here.
driver's license. I need some form of ID.
What's your officer badge number?
451. Make sure you zoom in right there. All right, and make sure you get Arnold. All right. Now I need to see your ID.
Officer from Jonesboro Police Department.
Now that you know that I'm a police officer.
He is likely to probably try to arrest me for some unknown law that you have to show papers to the SS when they stop you.
Need to see your ID, sir.
I'm in my own garage with my property.
Government operations. It is called obstruction.
Obstruction from standing in my garage.
I'm asking you lawfully for your identification.
But you don't have any reasonable suspicion.
You kind of gave us that law when you screamed at us down there.
When you're screaming at us.
When I can hear you from where that car is, which is not in front of your
Sir,
house.
I need to see your identification right now.
All right, what if I don't give you my ID?
Then I'm going to take you to jail for disorderly and obstruction.
Just for the record, because this is on camera.
I don't care. I'll put it in evidence.
Look, I do not consent to this. This is a violation of my privacy. My Fourth Amendment right is being violated right now. Okay. I'm going to comply with this police officer, even though I'm not constitutionally in any.
Give me your ID.
I'm explaining myself to you right now.
Well, you ain't got to explain yourself to me.
I do have to explain myself before I do anything. I'm about to hand this man my ID. I have a perfectly clean record, and you're about to see how the police work in the United States. This is what happens when the economy collapses and the police work as revenue generation. I'm handing him my ID. This is not constitutionally allowed. This guy's violating my Fourth Amendment right. Both of y'all should be ashamed of yourselves. You're violating your oath to the Constitution right now. We are not slaves. You work for me, buddy. You need to get out of my property, too.
I will take off down to my boxer shorts just to show you that I am unarmed. There's nothing on my porch here. But clearly, excuse me, I was warned last night at 11:58 p.m. I documented it. We called the officer with national media, and you never called me back. You never called me back. You know you didn't. No, you were going to call me, but instead you came up here to silence me for good. I called you with national media who etched me to call you, called you on three-way, and I am shocked. Thank God I got a warning. This is real. This is so... How could... You know I have no car. I'm in... How? I have no money, I told you. How?
You said you make money off of YouTube.
I don't get a check except for once a month for $50, for God's sakes.
You didn't
tell me how much you got. Am I supposed to tell you this? How much I make? But you were cooperative with me. I'm cooperative with you right now. I have no weapons. I was warned that this was going to happen by one of your officers last night. They said this was going to happen today. They warned me. My God, this is so fucking real. Listen to me. Oh my God. You guys are going to cause me to have a heart attack. I'm telling you right now. Yes, you are. I'm telling you right now, you're going to cause me to have a heart attack. You can take me all day. I don't care. Okay, I'm here to help you. No, you're not. I don't see an ambulance. I don't see an ambulance. I don't see a paramedic. No, don't tell me you're to help me. I don't see a paramedic. I don't see an ambulance. I don't see the mayor. All I see is police brutality. You want me to get an ambulance out here? I want you to go away. I'm clearly not. I'm not a harm to myself. You're upset. Listen. I'm going to tell you one more time. I have a 6-year-old son who's got to flee the country with his mom because we're in fear for our lives. We got a warning from your officer last night at 11:58 p.m. warning us that this was going to happen and make sure that my wife and kid do not come back to this place. I told her that on the phone today. You can call her yourself. I told her this was going to happen. This is real. You can't escape it at this point. And now you're causing me undue stress. And this is on the record. I'm telling you right now. This is undue stress. Look at me. Look at me. I was warned last night at 11:58 p.m. by a kind officer who knocked on my door. I didn't open up the door. I would open up. Now they're barging in my door for one reason. Down the ground, down the ground, down the ground, down. Down, down, down to your heads! Hands, come to me, come to me, come to me! Ow, my spleen! Ow, please, my spleen! Oh my God, don't bleed me! Mark, take it easy. Just put it easy, Mark. You're right, just take it easy. I gotta go fast. Ow, my spleen! I just left the hospital, I have no weapons. Oh my God, Mark. Oh my God, Mark, please. Mark, oh my God, they told me you're going to kill me today. Oh my God. Oh, you're hurting me right now. I just left the hospital. I just left the hospital. Nice and easy. I just left the hospital. Why are you guys doing this to me? Mark, we're here to check up on you, buddy. All right? This is what's called checking up. Now you're deleting all my videos, right? The things are all posted. Absolutely not, man. They're all posted already. Please, may I have my iPhone, please? Would you kindly put my iPhone in my backhand? Please, that's definite. Surely, please. I'm sure it's recording right now. Up onto your body. 1, 2, 3. There's no rest or anything in here. Nothing on you? No, I have nothing. Okay. Where's your other shoe? Where's your other shoe? Right here. My God, I can't believe this. Alright. Where's your other shoe? Oh, there you go. I don't know what you want to talk about. Please, may I have my iPhone, please? Why do I have weapons on me? What in the world would I have weapons on me for? There's 50 officers here. I was warned by one of you guys last night that you guys were specifically coming here to do this to me.
Should we take a photo from the medical center? Okay. Just because of the injury, you know? Yeah. Thanks. You gonna follow over right there? Yeah. I'll follow him over. Hey.
Marcy Strandberg stopped at a light on her way home from shopping near Denver, Colorado. The next thing she knew, police had her at gunpoint.
I said, I have kids in my car, and they had rifles pointed right at me.
19 cars were held at this intersection that Saturday afternoon. Everyone was ordered out of their cars at gunpoint, including children. The boy in the green shirt is 16-year-old Michael Hantz.
They had rifles, guns, and everything pointed at me with shields and a K9 dog.
A robbery that just occurred with a gun at Wells Fargo.
Police were looking for this bank robber, seen here wearing a beekeeper's mask and armed with an air horn and loaded gun. He had just made off with $25,000 from a Wells Fargo a few miles away.
Last seen wearing a beehive mask.
Police thought the bank robber was at this intersection because there was a GPS tracking device hidden in with the money. The problem is they had no idea what car he could be in, and because of that beekeeper's mask, they didn't even know what he looked like. So everyone was treated as an armed and dangerous suspect.
We all had to have our hands showing and our arms out the window, and we had to keep our arms like this.
One by one, police approached each car with guns and shields. Nearly everyone was handcuffed. Marcy's 4-year-old daughter, who you can see she's carrying, was asleep for most of the ordeal. Her 8-year-old son, however, was awake.
My son was crying, and I kept telling him to keep his head down between his legs because I didn't know if open fire was going to happen.
That's Crystal de Guzman in handcuffs moments after she watched police take her son, 16-year-old Michael, away at gunpoint.
I think any mom would be upset, not knowing what's going to happen to your kid.
Police eventually searched this white Expedition. Inside, they found 2 loaded guns, the money, and the beekeeper's mask.
They have a suspect in custody.
45-year-old Christian Paish, a school teacher with no criminal record, was arrested and charged with armed robbery. He's pled not guilty. Was this a case of good police work, or did they go too far? Federal law gives police some leeway to detain citizens for a reasonable period of time as part of a criminal investigation.
A little bit of inconvenience, getting cuffed for a minute to see if you're armed, getting detained very briefly to see if there's some probable cause to believe you've done something, you do have to put up with that. But 2 hours at rifle point, I think that's a little excessive.
No question we inconvenience citizens. We feel badly about that. We apologize to them, but we made a tough choice here, and we arrested a very dangerous armed bank robber.
But what police did may have put the entire case in jeopardy. The accused robber's attorney says there was no probable cause to search the vehicle and that police violated his client's rights by pressuring him to agree to a search after he initially refused. If a judge agrees, all of the evidence, the guns, the money, the beekeeper's mask, could be thrown out because of the way it was collected. And as crazy as that sounds, some legal experts say they have an argument. Tim Olson, who was among those handcuffed at the intersection, says that would send a message to police.
If the bank robber gets away with it, that says you didn't do your job properly.
The judge's ruling in the case should indicate whether police were doing their job or if they crossed the line. Ted Rollins, CNN, Aurora, Colorado.
They just catch me out here sipping on this motherfucking Arizona and shit. You know what I'm saying? Just kicking it, waiting for my nigga Moore to come through. Shoot this TTT.
I thought Moore just came pulled up. Oh, yeah. He was right behind him.
I wasn't him.
Saw, but that was him.
Word. Get Cuzzo out. Huh? Straight. Look at the teeth. What's wrong with you? You got alcohol in there? Oh, I ain't got no alcohol in there. You see this? Sweet tea, pink lemonade. Who is you?
Police.
Okay. You see what I'm drinking?
Let me look at it.
You is looking at it. I'm not breaking no law.
Yeah, that's an invasion of privacy, but I got it on camera.
You don't gotta touch
so I can read the ingredients.
You can read it. Ingredients. Look and see what it is.
I want to do it. You ain't got to show him.
Go to the gas station and see what it is.
First of all, he's an officer copy. You don't even know if he's really a cop.
He ain't show me no identification for no reason.
Leave the property. You got 5 seconds to leave.
For what?
Yeah, for what though? What's the crime?
We got the camera.
What's the crime?
Leave the property.
He's a civilian as a customer.
Why not? What? I ain't breaking no law.
No, I'm in here 12 music. Wild shot down south side. I'm telling you, I'm day 20. I don't know who these guys are, but I'm saying they're bad. If you got one, you don't win.
Where your badge number at?
You need some
We got the
VJ.
camera. Where your badge number at?
Hey, 2-6 and Vietnam.
You got 5 seconds left. Put your hands up against the car. Put your hands up against the car now. Put your hands up against the car now.
I'm not doing nothing, man.
Sir?
Yo.
Put your hands up against the car. You're under arrest.
Yo, for what? I'm about to go. Yo, you want to drink this? For what? I ain't doing nothing.
Because I said you trespassing.
I'm about to get. Yo. Yo, what? What? For what? For what? For what?
Resist delay obstruct.
For what?
Put your hands behind your back, sir.
For what, though?
Put your hands behind your back now.
For what?
Put your hands behind your back.
This is an Arizona iced tea. I want everybody to see this.
Yo, he can drink the contents.
Half and half Arizona iced tea.
Trespassing, sir.
For what? I'm about to go to the store.
Put your left hand behind your back.
How am I trespassing?
Put your left hand behind your back.
I got it all on camera. He locked this man up for nothing, man. For nothing, nothing. He ain't do nothing. He thought that was the alcohol, so he didn't do nothing wrong. He ain't do nothing wrong. But he didn't do nothing wrong to leave the property. As a civilian, he has a right to purchase something as a customer if he didn't break a crime. You asked him to leave based on the assumption that that was alcohol, but you were wrong. So he didn't commit no crime. Yo, a lawyer gonna eat this up. Who? What did I do?
Who are you? My investigation. Leave the property now.
I tell you what, I'ma leave. I ain't about to go get locked up. I don't live out here. But my lawyer will be eating this up. My lawyer gonna eat this shit up. I'm leaving. You see me leaving. I could talk, but I'm leaving. All right, I could talk, motherfucker. Freedom of speech. Faggot.
But I thought y'all niggas was like filming the joint.
Thought it was a game, right? Like
yeah, I thought y'all niggas was filming the joint.
He played the shit out of X, huh? Or the mother. He played the shit out of that man, son. He tried to act like the fucking Arizona iced tea was a alcoholic beverage.
Yeah.
Did you saw the whole shit?
I got up because I thought y'all niggas was filming and I saw you. I'm like, yo, you niggas filming. You was making them tight. You making them tight? Wow. Not loose at all.
They got proof that's motherfucking Arizona. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Ain't nothing but a
straight up.
And he in a public park. He in a parking lot. They dirty as shit. That's a dirty motherfucker.
Excuse me, ma'am. Do you work here? Officer.
Hey, what are you supposed to be here tonight?
We shooting a video. That's what we doing in the process of shooting this video. Officer, I'd like you to take a look at the footage, officer. It's evidence. He could use evidence, officer. He has a right for the officer to see the evidence. You want to break the law.
I thought y'all niggas was filming though. That's why I was like, did I see what he ain't filming?
So it was acting. We thought he was acting. Thought he was part of the video, huh?
Yeah, I'm like, oh. Cause I was in there for a little minute. Right here.
I don't want nobody to run it over.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And this is
Oh, yes, grab that hat.
because I already know.
This is what he was drinking, half and half tea.
If you work in law enforcement, I have a very important question for you, one which soon may be a matter of life or death. I'm sure some people become police officers just so they can boss other people around, but I'm going to assume here that you mean well, that you want to be one of the good guys, in which case, my question is this. Is there anything the politicians could enact into law that you wouldn't enforce? Is there any order that you would refuse to carry out, or will you do absolutely anything your bosses tell you to? In the U.S., police have already obeyed orders to fine or arrest people for a wide variety of harmless activities, such as dancing at the Jefferson Memorial or having a vegetable garden in their front yard. Police have even gone so far as to execute violent paramilitary raids on food co-ops and organic farms. For decades, police have been carrying out armed home invasions, forced property confiscations, and other acts of violence against people who weren't hurting anyone, but who engaged in behaviors or habits which lawmakers have arbitrarily declared to be illegal. You may be comfortable in assuming that you'll never receive an order to do something truly immoral, but the fact is, with every order you receive, you have a choice between obeying without question or relying on your conscience. No doubt there were cops a few years ago who never expected to be ordered to disarm innocent people, to do door-to-door home searches without warrant or probable cause, or to detain and interrogate people for merely driving down a road. Yet police have since been ordered to do all of these things, and almost without exception they obeyed. So it's not unreasonable to ask, is there any point at which you will draw a line and say, no, that I will not do? And if you won't draw such a line anywhere, if you will do absolutely anything your political masters tell you to, how are you any different from the enforcers of Soviet Russia, Red China, or Nazi Germany? You may be tempted to say, I don't make the law, I just enforce it. Or to argue that if some legislature, court, or some authority above you says it's okay, then it must be. But keep in mind that this is exactly what the thugs of every tyrannical regime in history said to justify their actions. And how do we remember those people now? As courageous, noble law enforcers? No. Unless you want posterity remembering you as a heartless, mindless pawn of oppression, then you'd better decide, and decide now, where you will draw that line. Unfortunately, there's little indication that most cops have any line at all. The incidents of police officers refusing to inflict injustice upon the people are extremely rare. Even when cops say they personally oppose certain laws, such as marijuana prohibition, nearly all of them continue to violently enforce these laws against non-violent people. In other words, they recognize these laws as counterproductive and unjust, but they choose to enforce them anyway. For the most part, American cops seem completely incapable of disobeying immoral orders, and instead do what the enforcers of every other authoritarian empire have done, inflicting harm on innocent people whenever and however those in power tell them to, while accepting no personal responsibility for their actions. I hope you are better than that. Keep in mind there are a lot of decent Americans who do have the integrity and courage to draw a line in the sand, a point at which they will disobey and resist violations of their rights by those in power. It may be that they refuse to be disarmed. It may be that they refuse to cooperate with warrantless searches, or refuse to keep funding a government they view as destructive and unjust. Whether you agree with them doesn't particularly matter. What does matter is whether in the end you are willing, if and when you are ordered to do so, to violently assault the dissenters for their disobedience. When they draw their line in the sand and stand their ground, and your supervisors tell you to use whatever level of violence necessary to get submission and compliance from the resistors, will you obey? If it came down to it, would you kill American citizens for disobeying politicians? Now, if someone is actually harming someone else, of course you have the right to use whatever force necessary to stop the attacker and protect the innocent. But that would be the case even if you had no badge and no uniform. But when you try to arrest someone who hasn't threatened or harmed anyone else, but has only disobeyed some arbitrary regulation, then you are the one initiating force. You are the one starting a fight. You are the bad guy. Now remember, the American Revolution was people forcibly resisting gun confiscation, warrantless searches, what they viewed as unfair taxation, and a number of other oppressions, all in the name of law, all carried out by law enforcers. If you had lived back then, would you have been among the rebel colonists, the ones who refused to be disarmed, refused to pay taxes, and resisted warrantless detainment and searches? Would you have sided with the signers of the Declaration of Independence, or would you have been among the redcoats, the law enforcers, assaulting, caging, or killing any colonists with the gall to disobey the king? And which side are you on today? Of course, the message you'll get from your superiors, the politicians, and your fellow officers is that it's not your place to decide which laws to enforce, and that as long as you faithfully follow orders, that you can't be held personally responsible for doing as you're told. But that is a lie, a horribly dangerous lie. At the Nuremberg trials, it was established that the excuse used by the Nazi law enforcers that they weren't to blame and shouldn't be punished because they were just doing as they were told did not relieve them of personal responsibility for their actions. And make no mistake, if you choose to blindly obey unjust commands, and one day your intended victims decide to fight back, saying that you're just doing your job will not make you bulletproof. It may be your own life you save by deciding now at what point you will choose to be a moral, responsible human being instead of just an obedient pawn of those in power. Ultimately, only you can answer the question of where you will draw that line. But really, the only moral, rational answer is this. If something would be wrong for you to do without a badge, then you shouldn't do it with one either. The idea that uniforms and legislation can give you special rights is both false and horribly dangerous. Nearly every large-scale injustice in history was committed by people who wrongly imagined that their position of authority made it okay for them to do things that other people have no right to do. Like everyone else, you have the right to use force to stop attackers and protect the innocent, and when you do that, you are the hero. But you have no right to be the attacker, even if it's your job, and even if the aggression is called law. Always, in every situation, you and you alone are responsible for what you do. Wearing a badge and a uniform and doing whatever you're told does not make you brave and noble or deserving of any respect. Just following orders is a coward's excuse. If your job requires you to assault or cage people who haven't threatened or harmed anyone, then quit. Being an actual protector, doing the right thing no matter what anyone else says, even if it means disobeying orders and breaking the law, that takes courage and integrity. That makes you a hero. So, do you have enough of a spine to draw that line? Decide now, before your failure to think for yourself results in damage that cannot be undone. You know that something is horribly wrong in this country and all over the world. And if you're paying any attention at all, you know it's getting worse. The privacy and freedoms you once took for granted have been taken from you without your permission. And in return, you've been given the false promise of safety. But safety from what? And from whom? The only real threat is coming from the people in power, those who pretend that they're protecting you. More and more frequently, peaceful citizens are being beaten, tasered, and shot by police for the most trivial of offenses. And we stand by and watch. Soon enough it's forgotten about, and rarely is there any kind of punishment or retribution of any kind against the uniformed attackers. Some are even hailed as heroes for attacking these innocents. So it happens again and again, until it becomes normal for you to fear going a couple miles over the speed limit for fear of being brutalized. Why should this surprise you? This is nothing new. As has happened over and over again throughout history, our society is becoming desensitized to being oppressed. And that means a terrifying future for our children and their children. It's not okay to see injustice and let it go. But people do it every day because they think it doesn't affect them. It does. Like a schoolyard bully who is allowed to terrorize and assault the other children, If that behavior is not addressed and immediately corrected, it will continue. So how do we correct it? First, we speak out when we see injustice happening. Call attention to it. Once the first person speaks up, others tend to follow suit. Be that first person. Make it clear that you will use whatever means necessary to protect the innocent. It's okay to push back. It's okay to be angry, and it's okay to be aggressive in defending not only your own rights, but the rights of others. Don't fool yourself into thinking that keeping quiet and doing as you're told, passively allowing the rights of others, the livelihoods of others, and the future of humanity to be destroyed in this way will keep trouble from landing on your doorstep. And it isn't much better to sit on the sidelines crying for change, instead of taking it upon yourself to make that change happen. People have to pick their battles. The goal here is not martyrdom. But if you will never resist, if you are never willing to forcibly defend yourself or your fellow man, if you will never draw a line and say, "This I will not allow," then you have already lost. You are already a defeated and conquered slave. Look at the societies where everyone minded his own business, tried not to make waves, and didn't resist. How did that turn out for them? This country is headed down the same destructive path. If that's okay with you, then just remain silent. Just go with the flow and do as you're told. If that's not okay with you, then disobey and resist. If someone was threatening the safety of your own child or someone else dear to you, wouldn't you aggressively defend them? Some say you gotta look out for number one, and that's true to a point. However, it has been the courage of the selfless, those willing to put themselves in harm's way to defend others, who have pushed humanity forward. The world has already had enough examples of quiet cowards, passively looking on as their fellow human beings were oppressed, tortured, brutalized, and murdered. The defenseless need to be defended. Mothers who endure the pain and sacrifice of bringing a child into the world and putting the child's happiness and survival above their own is the only reason the human race exists. If you're one of those who intend to make a difference in the world, if you consider yourself an activist, then it's your job to act as the mother of humanity. So protect your children against predators by any means necessary. A mother bear doesn't ask a predator not to eat her baby. She stops it from doing so using defensive force. Often the mere threat of force is enough to stop an attacker in his tracks. To understand this is vital. This means it is possible to lead a non-violent resistance, simply by letting it be known that we will not stand by and let another person be harmed. In the wild, the predators pick out the weak of the herd because it's safe. The human predators treat the human herd the same way, targeting one person at a time as the rest of the flock stands idly by watching. It's high time the good people stopped allowing the weak and helpless to be picked off one at a time by parasites and predators, including the parasites and predators who wear badges and uniforms. If tomorrow you are the target of the power-happy thugs of the world, you will want more than anything for others to stand up with you, to protect you and defend you. But tomorrow you will not deserve to have anyone stand up for you if you do not stand up now for those whom the predators are victimizing today. It's time we dig our heels in and let it be known that we will not be beaten down. We will not stand by and watch. We will resist, and we will not give up.
It should come as no surprise to anyone who understands the police state in America that those who are willing to do violence on behalf of politicians are also willing to do violence on their own behalf. And that police officers, criminals in costumes with a badge and a gun, which don't grant them any special rights, of course, are notorious in American society as sociopaths, psychopaths, violent abusers. And it's really sad to hear that people turn to them for support and protection and to deal with other criminals when they're among the most offending criminals themselves. But we've talked about how we could end the police state tomorrow if we wanted to. It would be really easy if we immediately, as a society, had the awareness of what the police state really was and decided, look, we're not going to put up with this anymore. If you're a cop, I don't want you in my life. I will not be your friend. I will not sell you groceries. I will not talk to you as a neighbor. I will not say hello or good morning. I will not sleep with you and be married to you. I will not be your boyfriend or girlfriend. I will not engage with someone who is so sick, demented, and dragging down society. But for those of you who aren't convinced by the rest of the overwhelming data on the subject, the fact that you're 8 times more likely to be killed by a cop than by a terrorist, the nature of the system and how it weeds out good cops, and the fact that there is no such thing as a good cop in America today because every single good cop is protecting the system that defends bad cops, that allows them to continue in their job. So, if you needed one more piece of data to drive this one home, if I can share with you one thing that I hope will convince you to eliminate police officers as much as practical from your life, and I mean as much as practical. No, and I know a divorce is not easy, but it's a lot more practical than getting beat every day. And I know there are people who are going to be listening to this right now who know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you're in one of these situations, not only are you doing yourself a disservice, if you're the wife of a police officer who beats you, if you're the wife or relative or girlfriend or boyfriend, or you're in some relationship with a cop who is lowering your quality of life, who is abusive to you, not only are you doing yourself a disservice to stay in that dependent, violent relationship, but you're doing the world a disservice. You're doing your community a disservice because you're telling this cop, hey, it doesn't matter what kind of asshole you are in public or in private, you're still going to get laid. You're still going to get loved. You're still going to be supported, because we can't stop the paychecks from coming. As long as the United States Federal Reserve notes are forced on the American people, the government will always be able to print more and buy more people off. But we have the power to stop the people who are saying, oh, I don't care about morality. I'll do whatever the politicians say. I'll enforce whatever unjust crime laws there are, as long as I'm getting my paycheck. Well, it takes a lot more than that in a society to support a police state. It takes a certain amount of social buy-in, and I think it is absolutely crucial that we do everything in our power to spread the message about the reality of the police state and disempower them. And if you want a full explanation, please see our video from Bill Bupert, Badged Serial Killers and the Death Cult of Politics, if you really want to understand the depth of the psychopathy of police and why there are no good police officers and why government and the police in particular are a death cult. But we hear this today from freethoughtproject.com. Cops beat their wives and girlfriends at double the national rate and still receive promotions. Yeah, so if you're thinking about dating a cop, if you're in a relationship with a cop right now, you might think, oh, well, he's so nice to me. Oh, well, yes, he treats me well. He takes me out. He's got that big fat government paycheck. And he goes and buys me flowers. And I know, so he enforces the wills of, disgusting politicians, and he goes and beats up protesters and arrests people for victimless crimes. But he loves me. No, I don't think so. What are you dealing with? A psychopath who's going to be nice to you in private and then go violate people's rights in public. But do you really think that he's being nice to you in private because, unlike everybody else in the society around him, just because you're sucking his dick, oh yeah, he's going to be nice to you forever? No, sorry, marriage doesn't work that way. Statistics show that 1 in 4 women in the U.S. is a victim of domestic violence. Those numbers jump to 1 in 2 if they are married to a cop. Now, if you were to take cops out of the equation, that number for the general population would obviously go down a lot. And it's horrendous that it's as high as 1 in 4. But 1 in 2 if you're married to a cop. If you were to take out the cops from the general population, it might be as much as from 1 in 5 to 1 in 2. 2.5 times more likely. Law enforcement officers beat their significant other at nearly double the national average. Several studies, according to Diane Wettendorf, author of Police Domestic Violence Handbook for Victims, indicate that women suffer domestic abuse in at least 40% of police officer families. Whew. For American women overall, the figure is 25%, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Now, you're probably familiar with the phenomenon of underreporting. Yeah, that's right. A lot of shit happens in America that doesn't end up in statistics. Now, do you think when a cop breaks the law and that doesn't get recorded, you think the situation is going to be any different if it's a domestic violence situation? We know, as you can take this to the bank, that when we know and we see every single day, there are stories that come out of cops engaging in misbehavior and getting caught covering it up. You know that there are tons of cases where they get away with that, where you don't hear about the abuse, where all of that just gets swept under the rug. And yet, even with the reported numbers, studies indicate, according to the Advocates for Human Rights organization, police families are 2 to 4 times more likely than the general population to experience domestic violence, making the potential for disparities in protective success particularly troubling. Sociopaths are attracted to positions in which they are able to assert authority over others, so it should come as no surprise that there are higher concentrations of sociopaths within law enforcement. The trouble with spousal abuse lies in the very nature of police work. The authority and control in the wrong hands will be misused, according to domestic violence counselors. This isn't just somebody ranting on a soapbox. No, these are people dealing with the reality every day on the ground. Domestic violence counselors. What makes police domestic violence more difficult to deal with is the fact that women feel scared to report it. Even advocates for battered women are reluctant to dive into domestic violence cases involving police for fear of alienating the agencies they rely upon for health and other abuse cases, according to a report by SFGate. When other women report their abuse, they do so to law enforcement officers. Think about it from the position of one being abused by a law enforcement officer. The one doing the beating is simultaneously holding a position in which they are tasked with preventing that very abuse. As Diane Wettendorf says, quote, "The biggest problem for a woman reporting that she's been abused by her police officer, husband, or boyfriend is that nobody believes you. There are a lot of good cops who go into work for the right reasons to help people. Then you have those who are more interested in the authority and the badge and the gun." And now I will say, there might be people that become cops for good reasons, out of naivete. But let's be honest, becoming a police officer means becoming an enemy of the people, as much as the politicians at least. And if you think that politicians are here to serve and protect you or make your life better as opposed to pay off their special interests, holy crap, start reading the news. But there is not a single good cop who makes it more than a day on the force, because in order to stay on, you have to protect the other cops. You have to defend the organization, the institutions, the policies that say, oh, well, if a cop gets caught misbehaving, their punishment is going to be, paid vacation. Yeah, they call it administrative leave while their incident is under investigation. So Diane goes on, they start out with command presence and voice to gain and maintain control, and if that doesn't work, they go up the scale with an increasing amount of force until they get compliance. Unfortunately, these guys use the same techniques with their wives and girlfriends, and some of them go from 0 to 60 right away. Really, ladies, did you expect that when you got this monster home after a wedding that all of a sudden, everything was just he was gonna stop this behavior, that everything was gonna be okay? That if anything, that the accountability, the ability to get away that you had not married to him is somehow, you got to be able to know who you're dealing with here, people, please. These women not only fear retaliation, but also have an apprehension about their husbands losing their jobs, thus stifling their own economic future. And I guess this leads to another layer of sickness from the wives of police officers, is that you're going to let your husband get away with criminal behavior that hurts you so that he can keep ripping off the taxpayers, so that he can keep abusing people's rights at the behest of politicians. If they do report it, they often run into skepticism from the same law enforcement system they are complaining to. Quote, again from Wettendorf, a big part of police culture is the code of silence. The prosecutors depend on police for their cases. The police depend on each other. It's a very insulated system. Cops often look the other way when it is one of their own facing accusations. An example of this tendency to cover up domestic police abuse can be seen in the case of Jeremy Yatchik. This monster beat and tortured his daughter for years. His girlfriend even filmed the abuse with her cell phone and brought the footage to the police department that Yachik worked for. Now, I like to think of the case where there was the judge that was beating his daughter with a belt and she caught him on tape with that. Why do you think the guy that sentences people for victimless crimes, that has no regard for personal boundaries or personal property or your right to self-ownership, to be secure in your person, to not be beaten at home, is going to somehow respect these rights in any environment? I mean, you're talking about monsters and you're encouraging monstrous behavior. After showing the video to Glenn Johnson, the police chief, they failed to respond and she was forced to find another venue to expose this abuse. Also a study. Now, here's what gets me. This fight against the police state is often targeted at individual officers. And I understand when you have someone who has done something particularly egregious or monstrous, yes, you want them off the force, you want them off the streets, you want them behind bars and isolated from the rest of society where they can't really hurt anyone if possible. And you see people pleading to the police chiefs, to the department heads, to city council, and they do the exact same thing of excusing this bad behavior, of protecting these people. And this article even gets into that very specifically with domestic violence. But there's not, you can't just hope that this system is going to fix itself, people. We have to actually change how we relate to cops if we want to see any change in the system. Also, a study conducted by the Domestic Violence Task Force called Domestic Violence in the Los Angeles Police Department, How Well Does the LAPD Police Its Own?, revealed that performance evaluations of cops with history of domestic violence are largely unaffected. The study of the LAPD further examined the 91 cases in which an allegation of domestic violence was sustained against an officer. Over 3/4 of the time, this sustained allegation was not mentioned in the officer's performance evaluation. Duh, we don't care if you beat people. We, in fact, pay you to beat people. 26 of these officers, 29%, were promoted, including 6 who were promoted within 2 years of the incident. The report concluded that employees with sustained allegations were neither barred from moving to desired positions nor transferred out of assignments that were inconsistent with the sustained allegation. Wettendorf points out the most common fears when reporting police domestic abuse in her handbook. If your abuser is an officer of the law, you may be afraid to call the police. He is the police. Go to a shelter. He knows where the shelters are located. Have him arrested. Responding officers may invoke the code of silence. Take him to court. It's your word against that of an officer, and he knows the system. Oh, and if you think that judges are going to listen to you, you could show up with video, apparently, beaten and bruised, and a judge will say, well, can't accept this as evidence because it contradicts the police officer's story, and we need the police to be able to lie in court and get away with it in order to keep our racket of punishing people for victimless crimes going. What do you expect? Drop the charges. You could lose any future credibility and protection. Seek a conviction. He will probably lose his job and then retaliate against you. These fears can make someone feel incredibly trapped and feel like there is no way out. And this is a much broader point about relationships. Don't be in relationships with people that are violent towards you, that don't respect your property rights, that violate your person, that beat you. I mean, holy crap, people, you can do better than this. Acceptance of bad relationships encourages bad behavior. If you or someone you know is a victim of this type of abuse, we encourage you to no longer remain silent. As long as people go unpunished, they will continue their abuse. Film it, record it, expose it in any manner you can. Tell us your story, and we will expose these abusive jackboots for the cowards they are. And I want to thank the Free Thought Project for putting that together. But really, yes, at Adam vs. the Man, we're also happy to help you expose any of these criminals if you like in your life. But or if you want to call in and talk about these issues, if you have personal experience, we definitely encourage that. But in a much broader sense, it is really easy for us. It is really easy for society to completely overthrow the police state right now. All we have to do is stop tolerating relationships with violent abusers.
Is that worth the psychological gratification that you get from seeing a black man in the White House?
I've been pleased with many things from the last 3.5 years.
Do you see what my color is?
Yeah.
When should you shoot a cop? That question, even without an answer, makes most law-abiding taxpayers go into knee-jerk conniptions. The indoctrinated masses all race to see who can be first and loudest to proclaim that it is never okay to forcibly resist law enforcement. In doing so, they also inadvertently demonstrate why so much of human history has been plagued by tyranny and oppression. In an ideal world, cops would do nothing except protect people from thieves and attackers, in which case shooting a cop would never be justified. In the real world, however, far more injustice, violence, torture, theft, and outright murder has been committed in the name of law enforcement than has been committed in spite of it. To get a little perspective, try watching a documentary or two about some of the atrocities committed by the regimes of Stalin or Lenin or Chairman Mao or Hitler or Pol Pot or any number of other tyrants in history. Pause the film when the jackboots are just about to herd innocent people into the cattle cars or just about to gun them down as they stand on the edge of a ditch, and then ask yourself the question, when should you shoot a cop? Keep in mind, the evils of those regimes were committed in the name of law. And as much as the statement may make people cringe, the history of the human race would have been a lot less gruesome if there had been a lot more cop killers around to deal with the state mercenaries of those regimes. Now, people don't mind when you point out the tyranny that has happened in other countries, but most have a hard time viewing their own country, their own government, and their own law enforcers in any sort of objective way. Having been trained to feel a blind loyalty to the ruling class of the particular piece of dirt they live on, also known as patriotism, and having been trained to believe that obedience is a virtue, the idea of forcibly resisting law enforcement is simply unthinkable to many. Literally, they can't even think about it. And humanity has suffered horribly because of it. It is a testament to the effectiveness of authoritarian indoctrination that literally billions of people throughout history have begged and screamed and cried in the face of authoritarian injustice and oppression, but only a tiny fraction have ever actually lifted a finger to try to stop it. Even when people can recognize tyranny and oppression, they still usually talk about working within the system, the same system that's responsible for the tyranny and the oppression. People want to believe that the system will, sooner or later, provide justice. The last thing they want to consider is that they should illegally resist, that if they want to achieve justice, they must become criminals and terrorists, which is what anyone who resists legal injustice is automatically labeled. But history shows all too well that those who fight for freedom and justice almost always do so illegally, i.e., without the permission of the ruling class. If politicians think that they have the right to impose any law they want, and cops have the attitude that as long as it's called law, they will enforce it, what is there to prevent complete tyranny? Not the consciences of the lawmakers or their hired thugs, obviously, and not any election or petition to the politicians. When tyrants define what counts as law, then by definition, it is up to the lawbreakers to combat tyranny. Pick any example of abuse of power, whether it's the fascist so-called war on drugs, the police thuggery that has become so common, the random stops and searches now routinely carried out in the name of security, such as at airports, border checkpoints that aren't even at the border, sobriety checkpoints, and so on, or any other example. Now ask yourself the uncomfortable question. If it's wrong for cops to do these things, doesn't that imply that the people have a right to resist such actions? And of course, state mercenaries don't take kindly to being resisted, even non-violently. If you question their right to detain you, interrogate you, search you, invade your home, and so on, you are very likely to be tasered, physically assaulted, kidnapped, put in a cage, or shot. If a cop decides to treat you like livestock, whether he does it legally or not, you will usually have only two options: submit or kill the cop. You can't resist a cop just a little and get away with it. He will always call in more of his fellow gang members until you are subdued or dead. Basic logic dictates that you either have an obligation to let law enforcers have their way with you, or you have the right to stop them from doing so, which will almost always require killing them. Politely asking fascists to not be fascists has a very poor track record throughout history. Consider the recent Indiana Supreme Court ruling, which declared that if a cop tries to illegally enter your home, it's against the law for you to do anything to stop him. Aside from the patent absurdity of it, since it amounts to giving thugs with badges permission to break the law and makes it a crime for you to defend yourself against a criminal, if he has a badge, consider the logical ramifications of that attitude. There were once some words written on a piece of parchment, those words now known as the Fourth Amendment, that said that you have the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures at the hands of government agents. In Indiana today, what could that possibly mean? The message from the ruling class is quite clear and utterly insane. It amounts to this: we don't have the right to invade your home without probable cause, but if we do, you have no right to stop us, and we have the right to arrest you if you try. Why not apply that to the rest of the Bill of Rights while we're at it? You have the right to say what you want, but if we use violence to shut you up, you have to let us. I can personally attest to the fact that that is the attitude of the U.S. so-called Department of Justice. Or maybe, you have the right to have guns, but if we try to forcibly and illegally disarm you and you resist, we have the right to kill you. Ask Randy Weaver or the Branch Davidians about that one. You have the right to not testify against yourself, but when we coerce you into confessing and call it a plea agreement, you can't do a thing about it. What good is a right? What does the term right even mean if you have an obligation to allow jackboots to violate your so-called rights? It makes the term absolutely meaningless. To be blunt, if you have the right to do A, it means that if someone tries to stop you from doing A, even if he has a badge and a politician's scribble, sometimes called law, on his side, you have the right to use whatever amount of force is necessary to resist that person. That's what it means to have an unalienable right. If you have the unalienable right to speak your mind, a la the First Amendment, then if all else fails, you have the right to kill government agents who try to shut you up. If you have the unalienable right to be armed, then if all else fails, you have the right to kill government agents who try to disarm you. If you have the right to not be subjected to unreasonable searches and seizures, then if all else fails, you have the right to kill government agents who try to inflict those upon you. Those who are proud to be law-abiding don't like to hear this and don't like to think about this, but what's the alternative? If you do not have the right to forcibly resist so-called legal injustice, that logically implies that you have an obligation to allow government agents to do absolutely anything they want to you, your home, your family, your neighbors, and so on. Really, there are only two choices. You are a slave, the property of the politicians without any rights at all, or you have the right to violently resist government attempts to oppress you. There can be no other option. Of course, on a practical level, openly resisting the gang called government is usually very hazardous to one's health. But there's a big difference between obeying for the sake of self-preservation, which is often necessary and rational, and feeling a moral obligation to go along with whatever the ruling class wants to do to you, which is pathetic and insane. Most of the incomprehensible atrocities that have occurred throughout history were due in large part to the fact that most people answer never to the question of when should you shoot a cop. The correct answer is when evil is legal, become a criminal. When oppression is enacted as law, become a lawbreaker. And when those violently victimizing the innocent have badges, become a cop killer. So the next time you hear of a police officer being killed in the line of duty, take a moment to consider the very real possibility that maybe in that case, the law enforcer was the bad guy and the cop killer was the good guy. As it happens, that has been the case more often than not throughout human history.